My name is Molly Cochran. I'm calling this meeting of the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council to order at 6:02. So we've got a big agenda ahead of us. Let's get going. I have the immense honor of serving as chair on this council on behalf of our IDEM Director Terry Gray. We have a quorum, we have an agenda, and are there any recommended changes to the agenda at this time? Hearing none, the agenda is approved by consent. All right, next item. So the next item is the meeting minutes from November 28th, 2022. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda? Hearing none, hearing no objections, the minutes are approved by consent. All right. The next item on the agenda is public comment on any matters not included on tonight's agenda. If so, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands, is there any on Zoom? All right. If no hands, then we're going to move on to the next item. 3 down. Here we go.
Good job.
For shellfish item. For a shellfish item, we're going to turn it over to Katie. We're going to go to the approval of the minutes for the Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting held on March 8th and March 22nd of 2023.
We had 2 SAP meetings, both presentations and minutes are in the e-packet. Just quick summary, we had 1 aquaculture lease application for Rhode Williams that passed unanimously. And other than that, we had presentations on the Providence River. And then at the second meeting, the Shellfish Advisory Panel voted to recommend to the council a schedule for Providence River. So we will touch that on the next agenda item. So
We can do by consent. Is there any objections to approving the shellfish minutes? All right, hearing no objections, the minutes are approved. So moving on to the next item, the 2023 harvest schedule of Providence River Shellfish Management Area. Katie, take it away.
So at the last SAP meeting, we had a discussion, and there were 4 proposals for schedules for the Providence River openings. The motion that passed 11-1 in support of the schedule. Do you want me to get into vision first?
So if we want to have, is it on? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I can go through the schedule. So for the 2023 harvest schedule for the Providence River Shellfish Management Area, the SAP recommendation is for commercial to be open 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. with a 6 bushel per license per day harvest limit on the following days. Between May 22nd and September 1st, it would be open Monday and Wednesdays. June 27th, it would be open as well. Between September 2nd and October 31st, it'd be open Tuesdays only. Between December 11th and December 31st, it would be open the first available weekday, not closed due to water quality impairment. Be closed on Christmas. And for recreational, it would remain status quo, which would allow for daily open recreational shore digging, and it'd be closed to anything other than shore digging. So no boat recreational harvest.
Great. So you want to go to the staff's recommendation? Do you want to add anything to that? Any questions from the council?
Is there any questions from the council? And I will go to the recommendation from
All right. So what's the division?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I first want to say thank you to all the number of proposals that were presented to the staff. I think that highlights great interest in the river, as well as that diversity in the way people harvest in the river. So thank you for that. The division put forth the proposal that originally would have been anticipating 28 days of the schedule with an anticipated 50% closure. So the basis of our feelings on the river is that, the current schedule is too, liberal in terms of, and risking of overfishing, and based on the MSY results we have in the simulator, that would, we put forth a 14-day schedule of, which would equate to a 28-day schedule of fixed days, for the river. As similar last year, that's based on simulation results for the river, for the area, trying to understand variation in harvest, for the person as well as participation on a given day. So that 14-day does have uncertainty. So that's like a 50% probability of being hitting the MSY. Someone could be more, there could be a more liberal proposal put forth that would assume more risk if the council wanted to do that. You know, if there was interest in doing so, if this proposal were to move forward, I would request or recommend to the director there be additional fail-safes or restrictions, such as like some type of total number of days open and then closing if the schedule, we had a dry year, or if it persisted, to make sure that we don't exceed MSY, or we lower the risk of exceeding MSY. And that, you know, it's up to the council what that day is. If you were to look at like a, you know, increasing the risk by, you know, 20% or 30%, that'd be 17 days for a backstop. If you were to like look at 20 days, that'd be like a 75-79% risk of within that probability distribution. So in terms of the amount of risk that the council wants to assume, I will leave that up to them. If there was additional things to consider as well, there could be other things that might be able to offset excess in days, like one license a boat, or difference in timings of the opening. So there's other things that the council could consider. But currently, as proposed, the division would not support this proposal as is, and would look to try at least to put in some type of total amount of days open. And whether that coincides with certain months, or if it coincides with days up through, for example, October to leave December uncut. That's I'll leave that to the council and answer any questions on that. But as proposed currently, this schedule would be either too liberal and risking excess harvest and exceeding MSY. Happy to answer any questions.
What was it last year? I can't recall.
Which part, the schedule?
The schedule, and how did it work?
Schedule was pretty similar, I would argue, or I would say, except for the fact that this schedule is fixed days as opposed to last year, which was rolling, which the division greatly appreciates the SAP's switch from rolling or moving days to fixed. With that said, even with the anticipated 50% days closure on an average year during these times due to rain, it would still result in exceeding, you know, over 20 days of anticipated harvest, which the division would not support.
In last year, how many days did it end up being?
It was a dry year. I think it was 28 total. And I'm gonna say, based on harvest, it was about 350-400,000 clams a day harvested from the river.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council, the division? Any commentary from the council?
Yeah, comment here. I fully agree with the division that some sort of cap needs to be placed on this. Now that we've basically seen our rainfall patterns to be rather odd in comparison to past years. Some years exceedingly wet and some years exceedingly dry. It's my feeling it would be rather prudent to put in a total fishing day count to basically to click in, just in case. It is in fact another dry year, year. My recommendation would be 18, but that could be so I would basically make a motion to set it at a cap at 18 to basically click in case there is a dry situation, and then basically sort of and how it works out as it gets distributed, that could be discussed.
Are you making?
I'm making that motion to basically make a cap, adding to whatever we decide, that there be essentially a firm cap on numbers of days.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just before we go into further deliberation, I did have a question that, it looks like the schedule here has, both Labor Day and Memorial Day as currently
It
proposed.
should be September 5th, not September 2nd.
And I guess my question is, was the intention of the proposal to have Memorial Day and Labor Day closed? And if not, we may want to address that in the final motion.
I might hold on your.
It-
And then.
Yeah, so that is in the minutes that I have in front of me, September 5th is the instead of September 2nd, it should say September 5th. So that would not.
And he's against Memorial Day, and I think 4th of July is a Tuesday. So I think we're all
So
set
then,
there.
Just wanted to clarify,
because starting September 5th is Tuesdays. So
Do I have, if, looking at this, do I have?
I was going to second that.
Okay, so do you want to just restate the motion then?
Yeah.
What you want to make the motion of?
So the motion is to whatever distribution scheme there is, that basically the total be held at 18, and that will depend on the amount of rainfall, but basically no more than 18 grams.
and so that's the entire season, every if you kind of split it up,
Yeah.
including December.
Hold on, we'll wait to discuss really quick. Do we have a second on it?
Yeah, we have a second.
Okay, so that's that. Okay, sorry. No, go ahead.
I think I'd like to go to the audience and maybe get Mike, who made this proposal, and just weigh in.
Yeah, Mike McGivney, Rhode Island Shellfish Association, this is our proposal. Basically it mimics what we've been doing, the number of days potentially for the last 2 opening years. We did make some modifications after listening to enforcement and some concerns from Fish and Wildlife. We went to dedicated days because they had concerns about that. Just so you know, we understood the year before, the first year we had it opened, we only had 11 days all summer long. It wasn't until December that we got 3 fishing days in at the end to make it 14. That year was the 3rd wettest year since 1904. Of course, the next year, we had the 3rd driest year since 1904. So we're talking the 2 major ends of the spectrum. We had 28 days, we got that last year in. So if you had 28 and 14, that's like 42. So your average of 21, I think, is what I think we've been looking for, trying to adopt. When we switched to 2 days a week, we also went to the rolling days because we understood that the way it works, it could rain on a Wednesday and you could lose it all week. So the Monday, Wednesday actually restricts us a little bit, that we know that we could lose days because of that. It could rain on a Wednesday afternoon and we're not going to get it the entire next week. So we understand the concerns of enforcement, and for that reason, we moved to that. Also in the September, October, we went to a dedicated day of Tuesday. Now, that really restricts when you have one day of a week, what you can get. You know, it could rain, like I said, Tuesday night, and you don't get it the whole following week. So we're being restrictive in how we're scheduling it in the days, even though we're asking for the same number of days that we did last year and the year before. Our position is that we can't control rain. It's amazing the ups and downs of the weather, whether it's climate change or just the irregularities. You can have a rainstorm go through Providence and Wesley doesn't get a drop, and they would close it. So I think we're being we're being consistent in what we're asking for. I think 18 days is not enough for a cap. And I also ask, and I go to Connor on this one, the September, October openings for us are just, you know, are good openings and they're important openings, but it's the December openings that are really crucial for us, for the market, for the fishermen. They just raised our licenses 50%, you know, along with Christmas and the holidays. So getting those 3 days potentially are really important to us. It's funny, the year of the drought, we got all 3 days in. And the year, I mean, the year of the rain, the year of the drought, we only got 1 day in. So you never know, December's a wet month. So whatever we come up with, and I have talked to Connor about this, we need a set aside for December. That those 3 areas should still be available if there's a cap in place. I guess it'd be up to the council to try to figure that out, or if 18 is the cap and then you still get the 3 days or whatever they decide, but the December openings are very important. And for that reason, we were fortunate enough that enforcement, who was at the SAP meeting, agreed that we switched to rolling days in December. Just because, just to show you how it worked out this last year, Monday, the 11th was the first day that the area could open. What's that?
30 seconds left.
Okay, well, and we got it in Monday, and it rained. We didn't get any the rest of December. We didn't get Greenwich 1 day, and all. So it's so difficult to plan, but it's still important. So since I'm on the time, I ask that they do not count the days, or if they do, be more liberal than what's been asked for, or what's been put on the table.
I am just gonna jump in before we, because I did not say this in my haste and excitement. We are gonna be limiting public testimony to 3 minutes per person today, so that's why you'll see it. You get down to a minute, try to wrap things up. Thank you, Mike, for being our guinea pig today. So I'll defer to Mr. Monty for one clarification, and then we'll get back up to public.
Mike, it sounds like that you're not opposed to some kind of cap with days. And if so, is 18 plus providing for the holidays in the winter months acceptable? Like what is that? What is the number of days? I know you said, gee, it could be 28, or last year you got 28 days, and the year before that you were 11, and it averaged out. But it sounds like there are some obviously that are looking for some type of cap. If 18 days is not it, is it 18 plus 3? For the winter? I'm asking.
Well, when we first did this, we only got the 11 days for the summertime. So that's when we asked to go to not counting the days. And that was agreed upon last year. Now I understand things changed. We had the dry, we had a very good harvestable year. I mean, if you're looking for a number, I'd say 20 plus the December openings. Would be fair. We want to make sure these things last till who knows, how the rain's going to be, but we'd like to see them last into September. That way they'll take advantage of the summer markets. And I think 20 would put us close to that. But like I said, we need to have a set aside for the December opening. So if you put me on the spot, I'd say 20 with the plus the 3 December ones.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Mhm.
What number of days would the division support?
Well, our original proposal was 14. If the council wants to assume more risk, that's up to the council. I think you pose a compromise between Dr. Rice's motion and Mike's request. I agree with Mike that probably is prudent to try and have your cap not apply to the December month, is to try and both, utilize the resource at a time where the demand is there. So whether that's 20 or 18, or I'll let the council decide. There's a social increased risk, maybe, going from 70% of that distribution over to now in the 80s by going to 20 or 79. So probably 10% is what you're shoving over on that distribution as we talked at the SAP and as in your e-packet. But I would ultimately the amount of risk that the council wants to assume, I'll leave that up to you all. But, I think trying to devise a schedule that allows for the maintenance of the December harvest would be whatever the number is, not including December, would be supported by the division.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comments on this at this time? Okay, I have 2. I'm gonna go to you in the back and then I'll go to you next. You have 3 minutes. Nicole, are you ready?
Me,
Yep.
Mike Monaforti, fisherman. There's one variable there that was discussed at the latter part of the meeting. It isn't on that program, but if you change the amount of bushel, then the overall the days increase. So if you go to the scientist brought the woman brought that out. You change from 6 to 3, that doubles the amount of harvestable days that you can fish. So that also adds an equation into the whole thing that gives you some flexibility, a lot of flexibility in the plan. It doesn't have to be 17 or 20. It can now be 40 or 34. That's how it can fluctuate. And then if you take those days, you can divide them up into the summer months, or you can equally, which is the position of 2 dealers. They would like to see the market stretched out through the whole year, as versus the limited time during the summer and some in the fall. So you see the whole thing gets a lot more conservative, but also there's a degree of flexibility in the whole. It kind of goes to the doctor's plan, and you know what else too is it doesn't put a lot of strain on the resource in such a given time. You can kind of get a feel of how the resources is handling all this effort that is applied to. That's my comment. I also put in a proposal that kind of went into that point.
Thank you. I'm gonna restart the clock and I will go to, you have to say your name from
Jim Boyd.
Jim Boyd. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
Jim Boyd, Rhode Island Shell Fishermen's Association. Whether it's days, however you want to parse out the harvest schedule, the assumption is that there's a mean sustainable yield of shellfish harvest up there. Fact of the matter is, we do not know, in fact, no one knows what NSY is within the Providence River. If you look at the harvest per unit effort, this past year, which was dry in 2022, and the wet year in 2021, catch per unit effort actually increased last year over the first year that we were up there harvesting. So there's a tremendous resource up there, and the shell fishermen need access to that resource. And we think that the proposal that's been laid out through the Shellfish Advisory Panel is prudent and is consistent with the last 2 years of proposal. And so I am asking you to support the SAP proposal that's been put forth as modified tonight with a couple of date changes to be consistent with holidays and days. We listened to the division, we listened to enforcement. We modified our proposal to help broker some compromise. And rather than going with first available days, we went to fixed days, which helps with enforcement and scheduling officers to be out on the water. But that also reduces our ability to get a day or days on a particular week when you go to a fixed schedule. So we've compromised, we've agreed with a fixed schedule, with the exception of the 3 days in December, which would be first available. As Mike said earlier, we got 1 day in December between the river and Greenwich Bay. So we're asking your support on the SAP proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other public comment or on Zoom? Okay, I have one in the back. Give me 1 second.
I am Brennan Vega on SAP. I just think the industry has to be taken account into the decision. I mean, you expect dealers to find customers during the time when this area is open, and then all of a sudden it's full. And now what do you tell the customers that have been buying this product? All of a sudden it's closed during the busiest time of the year. I mean, Greenwich is open 3 days a week in the slow side, and now you guys want to put a cap on an area when the product will be dispersed, and I just, it doesn't make sense to me.
Great, thank you.
One quick one, if I may.
Actually, I get to go to Zoom really quick. We have an opportunity, so I'm gonna open up to Zoom really swift. And then I will see if there's any other hands. I have one hand. Go ahead.
Ken Randall, commercial fisherman. One big difference between this year's proposal and last year's is they removed the rolling days, so when water quality presented to us as SAP. And I think they sort of actually much more, it's not 50% chance of the proposal when the days roll, it's more like 30% chance. And they vetted all 6 proposals that we saw, and they said, you know, this proposal results in 40 possible days and a likely on an average year, 20 days open. But one proposal did have rolling days, so those days are only 30% likely to be closed. This schedule was all fixed days. So they're all 50% likely to be closed. So it is quite a bit more conservative than last year's in that regard by removing those rolling days, even though it's 40 proposed days. Statistics that water quality ran on the schedule showed that they're less likely to be open in this format than the rolling day format from last year. So I guess that was my main point. This schedule is more conservative, even though they're both 40-day schedules, but the how the days are laid out.
I will take one more comment. I think you've had an opportunity to comment, so I will take one more comment on this and then we'll go to the council. Any other commentary on Zoom? Okay, hearing no other comments.
Okay, so based on the discussion that Mike may give me, I amend my a motion to 18 plus in addition 3 December set aside days. So it'd be potentially 22-day cap.
21.
Or 21 day, yes, yeah, 21 day cap.
I just a second, you agree to that and then.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna vote on the amended motion at this time. So all those in favor of moving to amend to add 3 additional days in the month of December for a total of 21 days cap. Please raise your hand. You want to go to discussion? All right, well, please. Do you want to open up for discussion on the council?
Yeah, do you mind, please? Just
Go right ahead.
go. So I wanted to, I think 20 days would be a fair compromise. Just from talking to fishermen who understood that there would be a cap. And that would bring us to a maximum of 23 days total. Assuming that there's all 3 days of Greenwich, December were fishable. So I think that is a fair compromise. 18 would be a 30%. Reduction from the amount of days they were allowed this year, and I think a slow step down, assuming, because we have a small step down, because the CPU has not gone down, it's gone up, I think we need to take that into account. And then reassess for next year. I would ask the council to, I'm sorry, amend the motion again, the 20 days.
We actually cannot amend the motion again, so we can vote on this motion and then we can address any motion or any amendments after that, but we have to vote on this first motion. So I'm gonna put it,
So I just, this is actually 21 days, it's the 18 plus the 3 set aside, so it's only 21 days. Potential. Right, that's-
So, so I'm asking for instead of the 18. And Dr. Rice and I had spoken about this earlier, and it seems like that was manageable. He was in agreement that that was.
that would be, well, it's now become 21.
Well, yes, but I'm asking.
Well, that's almost to the level of the fishing at this last year.
That's 28. And that's assuming that grant, December will open.
okay, so what I think we should do is vote on this motion to amend first and see how it goes. And then we'll be back on the main motion, or we'll have an amendment. Let's vote first, yeah?
Yep.
So all those in favor of moving to amend to add 3 additional days in the month of December for a total of 21 days, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, against 3. So the motion to amend passes. So this now becomes the motion on the table. So there's opportunity for us to discuss, not to go back out to public one more time. And then we can vote on the motion on the table, or we can vote to amend. Or we can have a motion to amend.
I feel like we're cutting fish, we're making cuts when it's not, we're not seeing a drop in catch rate. We haven't, there's nothing indicating that there is a problem with the resource. These fishermen need this, the dealers need this, the state needs this. There's nothing, there are 22 more days possibility will make or break people's falls.
So this is the main motion as amended.
Yes, we're still in discussion. I think the concern is that we will overfish. And if we do overfish, it's going to be too late if we don't have a day cap. And the day cap is 21 days, is actually more than the 20 originally asked for.
But we don't know the MSY. We're just going off of, there's no hard number that we're going up against. So, and without CPUE going down, it's not indicating, and last year we had 28 days. It's not indicating overfishing. We're asking for less, but overfishing isn't occurring. Right?
I'll go to Connor for division.
Yeah, clarification on the motion and then a comment. If the intent, if I read this, if the intent is to say that to not have a cap applied to December days, I might say that the 18 days or 20 days, whatever is discussed, is specific through October 31st. And then leave the 3 days in its own thing, because the way I read that now, it's 21 days, which could all be used conceivably before December, and then this you would not get what you are intending. So just a clarification if you were to amend or to change the motion. 2 quick questions. I comment to Jim's response earlier. We do have an MSY. We built the stock assessment model. It has not been revised within the last year or 2, based on the stock assessment model, time it takes to rerun data quality and QAQC on land, etc. So it's not like the MSY is unknown, like that's where the simulation is based on. And I think it's It's encouraging to see CPUE increase, but I would just really quickly say CPUE is not abundance. Those are two different things. They can be correlated, but not always, particularly at the high extreme or low extreme of a population level. So just wanted to flag that for you.
And
For-
one more thought, and something that wasn't brought up is the what we're catching now is, it's smaller stuff and it's just gonna get bigger. And if these guys aren't harvesting it now, it's gonna be worth less. It's going to add up quicker. It's gonna cause, I don't know. It just seems like we had this discussion about December openings last year. If you look at what people are harvesting, why not let them get the stuff that's worth the most money at this size right now and let them fish now for 20 days and then next year reassess. Once we have more data.
Okay. So we have the main motion as amended.
So I have a question. So, Connor, if you were to, could you repeat that again about what this motion that is?
So the way I read this motion, the total of 21 days, if it's a dry year, you could use all 21 days before you hit December. So I was the way I read it.
Okay.
So I might suggest that the motion, I'm just saying 18 based on the motion at hand. So I guess the idea would be you want those 18 days to apply to all days prior to October 31st.
Okay.
And then leave the December schedule not subject to the cap. I just want to make it.
So are you asking to rewrite it so it says from May 5th to October 30th?
Yeah, or prior to October 31st.
So we need another motion for that.
So moved. I agree. Yep.
Any discussion?
I just have a question.
Yep.
It's actually for harvesters. Oh, which has to do with MSY. How many hogs and top necks are going back? What's most of what you're harvesting? Mostly pieces, or can you, we know that clams are going back. Small ones in, whatever. But I'm just saying, we're not taking all of the clams out of the water.
This is to me.
Yes, that's the harvester, so
There is
yes,
high grading going
I
on.
think in the ponds. So
There is
yeah,
high grading going on,
which is that,
right? And which is one of the reasons we moved the 6 bushel limit, because we wanted to discourage that and not have people throw things back. I just add that, we had 90 fishermen signed up for this access. It's been such a boom to the industry. I think we're still in good shape, but there are a lot of tops and bigs going back, yes, and evidently according to surveys above this area, which we may be accessing with water quality improvement, there is really a boom going up there too, as far as the biomass.
Okay, so we have to vote on the motion to amend, once again, to include October 31st.
I just asked for clarification. Was that just clarifying the motion on the screen,
Yes.
or was that a motion?
That was just clarifying. The intent was to have the 3 days.
I think we
In
actually,
December.
since we voted on it, we have to have the motion to amend, since it was the motion to amend. So we have to vote on the motion to amend to include October 31st. That provision, vote on it, and then that would be the main motion as amended. Okay. Since that's how it kind of played out, we kind of have to see that through. Yeah. So, all those in favor of including a time limit for the October 31st limitation, please raise your hand. Okay, so that's the main motion as amended, that passes. So the motion on the table is now to recommend to the director the adoption of a fishing day cap of 18 days for the Providence River Shellfish Management Area harvest schedule prior to the 31st, for 3 additional days in the month of December, for a total of 21 days. Is everyone ready to vote? All those in favor? All those against? One abstention. The motion passes. Okay. That is the harvest schedule for the Providence River Shellfish Management Area. All right. Okay, so for the next item on the agenda, there are a set of proposed regulatory changes that have undergone public comment and rulemaking, including a hearing held on March 6, 2023. So the best way to proceed with this, because it's easy, is to have, these have already been public noticed, as we will have the Division of Marine Fisheries present the proposed changes and weigh in on the impact. The council will be afforded time for questions and commentary, and then I will look to the council for a motion on each item in the form of a recommendation to the DEF director. Since these have already been heard and responded to through public comment, the council will not take input from the public tonight unless any member of the council wishes to incorporate any additional comments from the public. Any additional comments are limited again to 3 minutes per person and should reflect notions that are outside of what has already been given previously in testimony. That is to say, if you already sent in written comments and you spoke at a public hearing, you should not just repeat it. This is for clarifying comments only, and that's only if a council member requests them. Okay. So we're going to kick it off and start with 2023 recreational black sea bass management, and I will go straight to Corinne. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go over the black sea bass recreational proposals as they stand right now. As has been the case for the last couple of years.
I'm sorry, Corinne. I'm sorry. What we missed? The recreational black sea bass.
No, recreational.
Maybe.
We just finished. Go ahead, comment.
Thanks, Matt Chair. What Katie's saying is, the previous motion, I believe, was assuming the SAP schedule for commercial proposed dates. There is a recreational harvest that was put forth as status quo by the division. If you go back 2 or 3 slides. I think this is where you're speaking to, right, Katie?
Yeah.
Would be the.
Do we need to vote on
My understanding that the SAP recommendation was part of the last one, but not then. Then the council could discuss.
So
Was it not part of the recommendation prior? The SAP proposal
that? It was a
was
second.
capped.
It was a second. It was a second. We voted that on that one independently.
Okay.
So we need to go back and do the recreational then.
Just to clarify, the motion was for the entire harvest schedule, and so that included
Recreational.
the way the
Well, that
slide.
wasn't the intent of
That's fine. Yeah.
the stuff.
Okay, so we will just make note of that.
Yeah, as the motion is now, the recreational was included as part of the recommendation.
And since this has already been voted on, it's all. we're all set. Okay. So, Corinne, would you mind, starting from top?
No problem.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. As has been the case for the last couple of years, the regulatory cycle for Rhode Island has not been in alignment with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council. And so we've had this interplay between the two, and as a result, the recommendations for the proposals for black sea bass have been modified a bit from what they were when we first noticed them. So I'll be walking through the proposals as they originally stood, and then showing the modifications and explaining how those modifications came about, or the recommended. So back when we had the workshop, we knew at that time that we were going to be required to take a 10% reduction in black sea bass recreational harvest for this year. At that time, we didn't have very precise estimates of what the reductions would be for given changes in regulation. But our starting point at that time was these two proposals that we have here. So from feedback from industry, it was determined that the most palatable change in regulations to meet that 10% reduction would be a change in the minimum size from 16 inches to 16.5. Changes to season or changes to possession limit that you would need to reach 10% were pretty drastic, and so those were less palatable to industry based on the feedback that we got at that time. So proposal one, if you could go back one slide, proposal one has a 1/2 inch change in minimum size for both the general recreational, so private shore, rental boat, a change from 16 to 16.5 inches, and then we have the same thing for party charter. The estimated reduction you would get for that alone would be 11.7% reduction in recreational harvest, so that overshoots the 10% that we're required to implement for this year. Proposal two, the only difference between that and proposal one is that proposal two applies that 1/2 inch increase only to the gen rec category, and so party charter wouldn't increase their minimum size. For that, you get a reduction of 11.36%. So essentially you have that, the change in regulation apply only to the private sector, and then party charter would be able to maintain status quo. So as you can see, those two proposals get us more than a 10% reduction. And the next two proposals, 3 and 4, are modifications essentially to get some of that credit back, to not leave fish on the table. The thing to note with proposals 3 and 4, and these are mode specific, is that each of them only speaks to one sector at a time. So proposal 3, this applies to party charter. It has that 1/2 inch increase in minimum size. And it's essentially a response for that mode to say, if we have to have a reduction for our mode specifically for party charter, how would we modify the days to get some of that credit back, to not overshoot 10% reduction? And so they determined that they'd like to have extra days if they could at the beginning of the season. And so then would have a June 17th opening rather than June 18th. So proposal 3 applies only to the party charter mode. And so proposal 4, excuse me, that's gen rec answering the same question, is that we'd like to have more days at 3 fish per day rather than 2 fish per day. So to get as close as we can to 10% rather than going past 11%, we would change the opening for the 3 fish per day season to August 27th rather than September 1st. So proposal 3 gives you a 10.39% reduction specifically for party charter. And proposal 4 gives you a 10.55% reduction for gen rec. So for each of them, we're getting closer to that 10% reduction and not overshooting it for either of the modes. The thing to note is that each of this is only specific to each of the modes. They're not complete proposals in themselves. Now, neither of these can be proposed as the whole set of regulations to apply to the Black Sea bass recreational fishery. So given the modifications that we've made here, or the adjustments that were made here to get closer to 10% for each of the modes, in going to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, excuse me, we took this feedback and applied that to the proposals as we were going back and forth and figuring out what the estimates would be for reductions there. So in the process of going to the commission and providing a list of proposals that we thought would be options for Rhode Island, we modified proposals 1 and 2, and this is what we've ended up with today. So modified proposals 1 and 2 here. Proposal 1 is the original proposal 1 that we showed at the very beginning, but with those modifications to seasons that we have in proposals 3 and 4. So essentially here you have both modes taking a 10% reduction. They're going up a 1/2 inch in minimum size, and then they're making those adjustments to the season that they had determined they wanted in proposals 3 and 4. So this is modified proposal 1, which gets a 10.6% reduction essentially. Proposal 2 is the same thing as proposal 1 here, except that it's mode specific. Again, this is just like the original proposal 2. Here, only the general recreational category is taking a change in their regulations, going up by a 1/2 inch in minimum size, and then opening up at that 3 fish per day bag on August 27th rather than September 1st, attaining a 10.3% reduction. And so these two proposals here encompass what we had in the original proposals 1 and 2, but also those preferences that were displayed in proposals 3 and 4, which were selected by the mode specifically. So essentially here, these two, boiling down all the information that we have so far, really the main difference that you have between the suggested modified proposal is that, the question is whether you should have both modes taking a 10% reduction individually, or whether it would work for a general recreational category as in proposal 2, to take that reduction specifically and leave party charter as status quo. So these are the recommended modifications that we have after going through that commission process and after going through the Rhode Island regulatory cycle as well. I'm happy to take any questions if there are.
Do you want to take questions first, and then we'll go to the division? Okay. So I'll go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm so sorry. There was one more thing I wanted to mention, and I wanted to make this explicit. Any support that was provided for proposals 3 and 4 originally doesn't insinuate support for proposals 1 or 2 here. Because 3 and 4 are specific to each mode, neither of them is giving explicit support to these proposals as they stand here as modified. There's some make that clear.
So for that reason, we will go back out to public comment on just this one proposal. So, but when we get there, I want to go crazy. Okay. All right, I think
I have 2 questions. The first is in regard to the party and charter vote sector, and what percentage of fish are we estimating that they take of black sea bass? Is it like 90-10? Is it, what is that?
So for the past 2 years, it's been somewhere around 3% of the recreational harvest.
So it's been
attributed to party charter.
Private recreational angling has been 97 and party charter 3%. Thank you. And then the second question is, in checking even yesterday, and I just kind of validate this, the state of Massachusetts is going to have a consistent regulation between private recreational angling and party and charter. That would be at 16.5. However, the states of Connecticut and New York will be at 16 inches. Is that correct?
Yeah, Connecticut will definitely be at 16. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think New York is saying 16.
Yeah, just to offer a comment, I don't think any of these states have a final rules set during the process, just like we are. Are they? Okay.
Yeah. I think yesterday when I checked, it seemed like they were done.
Okay, sorry, so I'm catching on. So I can't remember what your question was.
Well, I very simply, the party and charter vote fleet, most of
sorry,
them.
16.
Right.
So you are correct.
Right, competes against New York and Connecticut, and that's what I
Right, we talked about that as a group a lot, because, as states, we were hoping to be as consistent as possible, but when we started running the numbers, in particular for Rhode Island, we didn't think there was any way that we could have a reasonable season and keep it at 16, so, and the public agreed with that.
So then if there's no other questions, I'll go to the division's perspective.
Sure, so I'll first just say that we can manage either of these, we're now in a mode split fashion, we can manage either proposal. As Corinne noted, they both meet the 10% reduction, without including the for hire, allows us to still meet the 10% reduction, given the differential of 0.3%. So I guess I would just like to highlight to the council that this is particularly a philosophical question in trying to understand or really decide whether for the reduction, both the for hire and private should be held accountable based on the magnitude of the for hire fleet. I say philosophical because, as we are now in this mode split fashion, until we're in a world where we have 2 separate RHLs for each sector, this may be a continued discussion in both directions, reductions or localizations. So how the council thinks about this tonight, not necessarily setting precedent, but it will start to, think about a framework or mindset of how we deal with each of these sectors in terms of, in either direction. Just to highlight Dave's question, Connecticut had moved forward. They currently have a mode split and they elected to pick a proposal aligned with that of 2, where for hire did not take the reduction. Massachusetts considered a mode split for the first time in many years, I would say, but ended up deciding to not go mode split and having all entities take the reduction as a recreational fleet at large. So just trying to give you as much up-to-date information as I know. Last I checked, I did not know if New York finished their cycle, but the Massachusetts and Connecticut have. So, so with that, happy to answer any questions, but the division can manage.
So Connor, I think I'm probably repeating things here, but, the sea bass taken by the for hire fleet is like 3%.
That was, I think, correct statistic, yes.
So by going to 16.5, it's gonna hurt us a lot as far as neighboring states go for business. We kind of foolish to go to 16.5 and stay at 16 where it doesn't hurt the population very much.
I think just maybe to rephrase what you said, mathematically, we meet our reduction without having them for hire be subjected to a reduction. But again,
Okay. Make a motion to show whatever.
I have one question.
Yeah, just my question is, in the Connecticut boats and New York boats fish Rhode Island waters, I know they always have. But their limit or their size limit is the state the fish are being landed in. Correct?
they have to have, they'd be restricted to whatever the home port is, but they could have a license, an out-of-state license.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, is because the Sunbeam, the Viking fleet, literally, I live in the tri-state triangle, as my friends call it, so. The Viking fleet, Sunbeam fleet, a bunch of other boats out of Waterford fish and watch out. So in fairness, yes, it would be ridiculous to raise the size limit to 16.5 if you're competing with your 3 surrounding states that are all 16. Just economically, because people won't drive across the bridge, they'll stay in Waterford.
I will, no other questions so far. I'll defer to.
Clarifying point to this discussion, Madam Chair. So, I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. So, if you are a recreational fisherman from Connecticut or fishing in Rhode Island,
No, party chart is what I'm saying, for hire.
either way,
Yep.
still holds. When you're in Rhode Island, you have to abide by Rhode Island. Now, I think if you're going to be transiting across state lines, then what you need to do is think about the rules in the most conservative manner possible so that you're okay in Rhode Island and okay in Connecticut. But you can't harvest a smaller fish in Rhode Island.
That's what I was wondering.
Just because you're going to go home to Connecticut.
Yep.
So. No other questions from the council? Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion. Go ahead.
Make a motion that we go with proposal 2.
Second. You second? I think Katie got to your first one. Okay, so with that being said, I'll go. Is there any comment or questions from the council before I go to the public on this? Okay, because this is different than what was publicly heard or at the public hearing, I will go out to the public. And I agree with one gentleman. Give me 1 second to get your 3-minute clock going. All right, go ahead.
Rich Hittinger from Rhode Island Saltwater Anglers Association. First is not a comment, but a clarification. Is there a proposal 3 and 4, or are they gone?
So proposal 3 and 4, they each are specific to the mode that they were speaking to, so they've been absorbed into the modified proposal.
Okay, so we've not been able to provide comment through a public hearing on these proposals as they sit. So our evaluation of these proposals has definitely changed because this is the first time I'm seeing them tonight. Now, we had previously provided public comment on proposal 3, I believe it was. I would say that based on what I see tonight, Rhode Island Saltwater Anglers would recommend proposal 1. That is because we have stated in the past that we think recreational fishing should all be together, and I think would be stronger if party and charter and private was all together, but rather than pulling in different directions. So for that reason, I think proposal 1 would be favored. In addition, proposal 1 gives party and charter an extra day at the higher limit. And I think it makes sense to have people fishing, whether or not you're on your own boat or you're paying for a day of fishing, you're doing the same fishing. So if it's 16.5, it should be 16.5. Let me take one step backward, and I guess on public comment. I think that black sea bass populations are in good shape. And the only reason why we are being forced to take these cuts is not for true species management. It's because it's being forced upon us by ASMFC. Everybody in the party and charter boat sector, as well as those in the recreational private sector who go out and fish for these fish, know there's plenty out there. So it's not a measure that is necessary for conservation measures. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. All right, so I have 2 and then I have 1. All right, so I will go to you first, and then I'll put you in the hopper, all right? Go ahead.
Thank you, Frank. Well, Francis, we point you to like to see option 2, just for the, well, I agree some with Rich. We are in competition with other states. They're already 6 weeks or a month short of season in the private rest. And Connecticut is open, I think, a month before us, and they have a 5 fish bag limit. Massachusetts will be open a month before us, and they're gonna have a 4 fish. Well, we're gonna have 2 fish up until, September, and, the summer months is the bulk of our business, so. For the competition reasons with Mass and Connecticut, that's why I would support the 16.
Great, thank you. And I'll go to you, Rich. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is probably the hardest thing for me that I've ever commented on in 20-some years of going to this thing. Because I get exactly what's just been mentioned. But I also think we've never split out size. We've had split mode in a few fish already, but we've never done one that had different sizes. And when you take a group and you start dividing it and splitting it and make everybody weaker, you end up fighting amongst each other instead of trying to come together for common solutions. And I would really caution the council to not keep taking steps that might divide us, because I don't think long term. I don't think it's good for tourism. I don't think it's good when people find out some people can keep smaller fish than other people. I don't think that helps us in the long run. So I would just caution the council to think that over before, even though it seems like a quick, easy answer. I'm not sure it takes us down a path that we really want to go down.
Great, thank you so much. Is there any commentary on Zoom? One hand up. All right. For the person on Zoom, you will have 3 minutes. You'll see a timer, I believe, on the screen, right? Yes. Okay, so you have 3 minutes. You state your name first. Go ahead, Rick.
Hi, my name is Rick Bellavance. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, yes.
Okay, thank you. Rick Bellavance from the Rhode Island Party and Charter Boat Association. I own Priority Charters out of Point Judith, Rhode Island. I support option 2, and I did submit a written comment, so I won't repeat those, but they do still stand. And I also just wanted to add that when we manage the recreational fishery, we project out what we're anticipating the landings will be. And then when we go back and look at the harvest at the end of the year, sometimes it doesn't shake out the way we thought. And just one example I can think of from 2020 to 21, we were supposed to take a small cut for sea bass. And when you go back and look at the information, the private modes stayed status quo at about 3.5 million fish, but the party charter fleet took a 20% reduction in catch that year. So although we try to make things even, it doesn't always work out that way. And this is a very small amount of difference between the two modes now that we've been relinquished to 3% of the catch. It just keeps going down. So the regulations that we've implemented over the past few years have taken a bigger piece out of the for hire catch than the private modes. So here's a chance to even it out a little bit. I appreciate the time to communicate, and I also want to say thank you very much to DEM staff for all the time they put analyzing all this stuff. It's challenging. We're all struggling about this, but you did a great job, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, is there any other hands? Nope, okay. All right, so I have two, but you have a question or?
So, but when you come back.
All right, so I think I'll start with you and then I'll go to you next, okay?
My honor for you, Fisherman. To Frank's, Mr. Blunt's point, why is it that we are not doing what the other states are doing? Like, why is it that they can have 5 fish if we're all going by what the overall landing is? So I forget the word that this one used here. But if we're all in that same pool, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, why is it that we're not doing 5 fish a day in the recreation in charter? Because why is that? Why is that why are we down to this 2 or 3 fish position?
I believe the answer is that in other states, the season is very compressed compared to our season. There are a lot fewer days. It ends sometime in September, I think Massachusetts does. I'm pretty sure of that.
If I may, Madam Chair, just from a high level, the catch composition for each state is different in terms of size, particularly, and then what we can then harvest is then to meet a reduction, we have to then cut in a certain fashion. So in certain instances, well, as a state, it's easier to get to a reduction with a given measure than in others. And so when that happens, it may force a state to look at a different measure to make up more percent in a given direction. So it basically comes down to the harvest data of which we have it at play, and then for a given state, and then doing the math that allows us to craft plans that work for us. So in an example, a different possession limit might be chosen for Rhode Island to allow for us to have a different size or a different season length. And so there's these trade-offs that over time we have made as a council and as a state towards an ultimate schedule. So oftentimes the differences are driven by the cash composition of which then dictates schedules and credit in any given direction.
So in other words, we have a certain amount of fish that we can harvest.
Mhm.
And then you divide that into the number of days, and that's how you come up with the number of fish that you can harvest.
And like the most simplest concept, yes, but there are interactions there. So size of fish, how many you take, when the fish show up, different seasons have different, volume, obviously, and the size class of fish that are here. So there's a lot of interacting elements, but ultimately the total that we can harvest, we then devise schedules, and based on when the fish show up and what other states are doing or other socioeconomic factors, we ended up in a position that we're in today. So you could go to a similar bag limit, but you would have to make a concession somewhere else.
Less days.
Or different size or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You still have a minute? Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take one final comment.
Ken Booth, I'm not a potty charitable fisherman, but just the logic, if I listen to the comments, the follow, that it's being forced on us, as Rich said, there's not a population problem. Both 1 and 2 meet the criteria. And it's almost typical government way of working is that
we're asking somebody to take a hit if they don't have to. Which is, to me, is kind of stupid, in that I can understand the equity, it's nice to be equal, but. Charlie Potter boats, when you look at the price of slips now, not everybody's in a state funded slip. When you look at the price of slips, the price of fuel, you get a little bit of angst among clients, and you're gonna have people really impacted in the next year. The money, all the money we've been giving away for the last 2 years is starting to dry up. The council will later be looking at a couple of other issues, and one of them could severely impact the availability of food in state waters. And you combine that with, if those fish don't show up, some of these guys are gonna be really hurting for business. So I just think if there's no reason to make somebody suffer for something, why do we do it? And I can understand the equity issue, but there's some other things at play too.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just a really quick point of clarification for Mr. Booth's comment. The department is not making anybody do anything. Like, this is a mandate from the federal government, and there's two options on the table, of which one applies a reduction to both sectors, one does not, of which were both put forth by stakeholders on preferred options. The division can manage both. Just want to iterate that.
Thank you.
So I will. Seeing no other comments, any on Zoom this time? Okay, can I see the motion? Thank you. Okay, so the motion on the table is up before us.
I have a comment on the motion.
Mhm.
Call.
Yep, that's fine.
That's it. May I, Nicole, see the slide with the options on it? I just like to point out that the general recreational category starts May 22nd, which was extremely important for the recreation fishery. And to get that early season, last year, there was a reduction in the number of fish that we were actually taking. The party and charter boat sector wanted to have an enhanced bag limit later in the season. And you can actually see this to 6 fish. But I think Rick Bellamy pointed out that the season really doesn't start until June for that segment. So it's like almost a month later. So I think those two things are important to note. I'd also like to say in regard to proposal 2 in the original 1 and 2, I'd like to point out that 3% that the party and charter boat associated sector actually took, which is minuscule. And I differ than my recreational brothers from RISA in that I've always felt that there should be a separate rule book for the party and charter boat sector. And this is a prime example of why there should be. Because here is a sector that takes 3% of the fish, has taken cuts just like the recreational sector does, and there's no reason why they should go to 16.5, considering the competition. The reality of the situation is that these boats will not be competitive in Rhode Island. People will go out on boats in Connecticut and Massachusetts if they're targeting sea bass. And that is burdensome. There's no reason for that to occur. It's not impacting the fishery at all. And so I'm actually supporting a proposal 2 for those reasons.
Okay. Can we go back to the motion? All right, so hearing no other comment or questions from the council at this time. Is everyone ready for the question? All right, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 2, the recommended modifications for recreational black sea bass management, please raise your hand. Unanimous. All right, motion passes. Okay, so we're gonna go to. Give me a second. So we're gonna go to, Corinne to address 2023 recreational Scup management. Go ahead.
Okay, so this one should be more straightforward than last feedback. The first proposal, I first want to note too, that for this year, no fisheries, we have a federal waters closure for Scup until May 1st. So in federal waters, it's closed from January 1st to April 30th. And the bag limit in federal waters is 40 fish per day too, which is relevant to the proposals that we have here. So the first proposal we have is regional, and this was an effort, between the states of Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island to have consistent regulations among all of those states in the region. And so this proposal here has an increase in the minimum size from 10 to 10.5 inches for all modes except for shore. And in this case, they have shore modes staying at 9.5 inches. And that includes all shore sites, not just special shore. So this was something that was conferred by all of the states in the region. So you'd have a 9.5 inch minimum size for all shore sites. Special shore sites would be retained for fluke, but they would not be retained for Scup. In that sense, all shore sites would be treated the same. You'd have an opening on May 1st to be consistent with federal waters. And then the bag limit would stay status quo except for in the September and October wave where it would go from 50 to 40 fish per day. And that's consistent with what we have for federal waters. You'll note here that for the reduction, so we're required to have a 10% reduction region-wide for Scup. With this proposal here, the region does obtain a 10% reduction for the region as a whole. But for Rhode Island specifically, we only get a 3% reduction with this proposal in general. And it was approved by all of the states, so I think that all states are on board with adopting this proposal itself. So that essentially means that New York in this case is carrying more of the weight in taking the reduction. We're achieving a 10% reduction for the region, but we specifically as a state are not having to take a full 10% reduction with the proposal that's on board here in the name of keeping things consistent among all the states in the region. Proposal 2 here, this was one that was proposed, and this was for the sake of achieving that 10% reduction for Rhode Island specifically to make sure that we had something on the board that would get us there individually as a state. For this, you'll notice that we just have an increase in minimum size, 1 inch across the board. The special shore would be at 9.5, everywhere else would be at 10.5 inches. And then you have the guidelines staying the same and the season staying the same, opening January 1st. With that bag limit in the bonus wave, September and October being 50 fish per day. The caveat here is that if you have a state water and federal waters permit, you're subject to the most restrictive. So if you were to have both permits, you'd still have to abide by most restrictive federal waters measures. Meaning you couldn't fish up until May 1st, and then you'd have a 40 fish per day bag limit maximum. So that's the difference between these two proposals. We have the regional proposal first, and then we have the industry proposal 2, which gets us past the 10% reduction for Rhode Island specifically. But resembles more of what we have as status quo.
Okay, I'm just gonna go straight to the division. Perspective.
The division supports the regional approach. I think it addresses some of the comments and concerns that the council just raised with black sea bass equity in the region. I think it also allows us to, of course, meet the reduction required in the region at the most minimal cost to the state. So I think that's good answer.
Is there any questions from the council?
I could make a motion, is that possible?
Is there no other commentary? Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to accept proposal 1, the regional proposal. As outlined here.
Second by Mr. Rice. Is there any commentary? All right, is everyone ready for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of regional proposal 1 as proposed for recreational Scup management, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Unanimous, motion passes. All right. We're going to move on to dealer striped bass reporting, and I'll jump right to John.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. So the first bit you'll see on striped bass is for our dealer regs. This is in response to a general lack of compliance last year during the commercial season, as well as a high, combined with high catch rate, made this fishery very difficult to manage. With that in mind, we are proposing to amend dealer reporting frequency of striped bass landings from each week on Monday and Thursday to basically 24 hours. So you have to report in season commercial striped bass landings within 24 hours of the date of purchase.
Does the division want to weigh in?
Yeah, this proposal, we supported, the real intent here is to try and improve reporting for striped bass and avoid any type of late reporting and missed projections and quota as a result of late reporting. That's a challenge last year, and this is one of the measures we're looking to implement to try and mitigate that problem.
Is there any questions from the council? Jason?
Yeah, just, it's not even from me, I've had enough phone calls and emails on this to hurt my head. I don't think there was, or I think people feel there wasn't much clarification on how this happened. That's, I think people, you know, you can call it conspiracy theories, whatever you want, but where did the fish end up? You know, was it, how much did the general category go over? How much did the fish traps go over? And why? You know, I mean, I don't think that was ever really clearly defined, at least. I mean, there's a lot of people that have called me and messaged me that are concerned about that. So hoping it can be answered.
Okay, do you want to go to the division?
Yes.
So I guess I'll just quickly comment that we did go through those numbers and those detail in the workshop pretty extensively. I don't have those on me at this moment, but back in January, February, when we had the workshop, we went through all those, and I'll look to Nicole that supplement anything I missed, but ultimately the two components here were late reporting. So ultimately fish were being harvested, not reported on time, and thus made it challenging for us to actually know how much quota was utilized within each sub period, which I understand is incredibly aggravating, given the periods are small, low quantity of fish and short. So to exacerbate that problem after we go through a council process like this, I understand that challenge, but that was the result of late reporting, of which we worked to address in the department through other means as well. And then the other part was the volume of fish here. The catch rates increased substantively this year. As many of you probably could know, there were many striped bass around, easy to catch. So the combination of high catch rates as well as late reporting rather, resulted in an overage in the first period. And for the general category, floating fish traps, the difference there was, unlike the previous several years, they utilized their full allocation. So there wasn't a rollover of any sort in the fall, as you all can probably recount. So there wasn't that other buffer. So we have two proposals, or two sections of commercial striped bass discussion for tonight. This first one is one measure. This is the first step of which we would look to try and put forth to help remedy part of the issue. And Nicole, feel free to add. Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that the workshop presentation is in the council's e-packet, and there was an additional slide that we presented at the workshop that talked about the changes in effort that we saw in 2022 compared to the year previous, where effort actually doubled. Which, so like Connor said, it's not just the late reporting. Even if reporting had been 100% on time, we still would have had issues in closing the fishery on time with the current reporting we have and the way catch rates change so rapidly.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions or commentary? I will entertain a proposal. Okay.
Yeah, make a motion to adopt the recommendation for the division.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any commentary before we go? All right, hearing none, is the council ready for question? All those in favor of approving or to recommend to the director the adoption of proposal 1 as notice for striped bass dealer reporting, raise your hand. Is it 3 down there? 6. Motion passes. Okay, on to John for commercial striped bass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next proposals are for the 2023 commercial general category striped bass management. You will see that we have 5 proposals here. Basically, they are looking at 3 things. They're looking either to amend the season start date, to either break the amount of quota out into 1 or 2 periods, and to add additional closed days or days out. And then they have various proposals there. So the first proposal is the division proposal, which would start, it has 2 seasons. It would start the first one on May 29th. The second one would start on July 6th. Both with a 5 fish per day limit, and then add an additional day out of Thursday in addition to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Proposal 2 would be a 1 season, 1 allocation block. And it would start on June 1st, going to the end of the year, December 31st, with additional days out of Tuesdays and Thursdays. Proposal 3, also an industry proposal, would have 2 seasons. One would start on June 1st, the second one on July 4th, add an additional closed day of Wednesday. Proposal 4 would start the season, it would have 2 seasons. It would start on May 22nd. The second season would start on July 6th, add the additional day of Thursday as a day out. And the final proposal 5 would have the season, well, 1 season start on May 22nd and have an additional day out of Thursday.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the division.
The division's strong, I guess, most prominent recommendation would be to not adopt a schedule of alternating days. Then there is a nighttime fishery for striped bass, and inevitably in doing so, you may not be, on a given day, you're either actively then fishing for striped bass or in possession of striped bass on a closed day. So and I'll look to our colleagues in enforcement to elaborate on that, but that's traditionally why we've maintained these blocks of time of open and consecutive days as opposed to alternating. I do appreciate the intent of the alternating, and that is, in doing so, it can help with the reporting issue if there's a day in, closed, but I think from the division perspective, at the risk of them having enforcement challenges and an additional level of complication within the commercial striped bass fishery, we would support consecutive openings as opposed to alternating opening and close.
I'll popcorn on up to law enforcement. Do you have any statements? No pressure. All right.
The question of the alternating days is the same. We agree with that having a consistent day of the days in a row due to the night fishery would be more prudent.
Okay, is there any questions from the council?
I don't know if I want to get into it. There's been so much discussion on all of this.
Okay.
I've read it a million times, so my head hurts.
I'll give you a minute. Okay, any other questions for the council? Okay. I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yep.
Well, I'll make a motion for, could we go back to the other motions? I'd like to make a motion to accept proposal 1, which is the division proposal, adding Thursday and starting May 29th instead of June 1st.
There's a second.
Second.
That's right. Open to the council. Okay. Are you guys ready for the question?
Just one comment.
Okay.
It's this fishery is going back and forth for so long. I mean, 2 or 3 days a week. It's going to be very similar with the effort that the fishery, no matter what we do, is going to last 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
for the year. I don't think it matters how it's sliced up, so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, we've been fighting this battle forever, so.
Okay.
You know, we could open it up and close it in 2 weeks, or we can open it up and close it in 4 weeks. I think this one might get us to 4 weeks. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Hearing no other comments or raised hands, all those in favor of recommending to the director. Oh, do you want to go up to the public?
Sure.
Okay. So these, just a friendly reminder that these were publicly noticed, so I will keep that time limit to 3 minutes.
And, it might be because I'm Swedish and I'm thick-headed, but I'm not understanding and I understand the department's perspective on the late reporting and millage, but I really don't have a good feel for, we're looking at a split on the percentage. Well, what is the poundage? Did we take a hit from going over last year into this current year? What are the numbers we're gonna harvest this year? And did the general category over harvest all of that fish? Or did some of that fish get over harvested by fish traps? And is the amount that each over harvested coming back against that sector, or is it being divided equally? I guess that's the question, because that's the only way you can feel comfortable voting on a 50-50 split if we don't know if it's going that way. If somebody over harvested, they should be, it's a general category, they should bear the brunt of it. It's the fish traps, they're gonna pay the penalty too. So then that has not come out, and I don't understand it, maybe it's come out, but I haven't seen it. So I'd just like to know that they're taking action. It's a sensitive issue, but it's, as Jason had said, I've got a bunch of phone calls on it, there's supposition all over the place, stories all over the place. Just put it to bed, and it is what it is.
Yeah, Madam Chair. So as I had said previously, the workshop presentation is in the e-packet. And all of those exact numbers to the pound are in a workshop presentation that was presented in January. And so both general category and floating fish trap had slight overages for the year in 2022. And so each of those sectors or gear types will take their respective reduction in 2023. So whatever Gen Cat went over comes out of Gen Cat this year, whatever fish trap went over comes out of fish trap this year. And again, I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but those are all in the e-packet.
Thank you, Nicole.
No, yep.
No, I'm just saying, can we call?
Oh, yep. So all right. So if you're ready for the question, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 1 as noted for commercial general category strike back management, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7? Is that a 7 vote? Okay. So 7-0, the motion passes. You gotta be confident now.
6.5. 6.5.
I don't understand. All right, so, all right, we're moving along, guys and ladies. Let's go to John for Menhaden, right? And this has 2 parts.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. So you'll see that there are 2 Menhaden proposals here. First, I want to make a clarifying point. In our notice, this was noticed as 1 proposal. In fact, it is 2. Proposal 1 is a division proposal, which will bring us into compliance with the fishery management plan. Proposal 2 is an industry proposal on possession limits. Let's take proposal 1 first. The division is proposing to clarify in our Menhaden rules that incidental catch and small scale fisheries starts when the state quota has been reached. Again, that's a clarification. And then the second is to remove trammel nets from a approved gear for incidental catch. So a trammel net would not be a small scale.
Thank you.
And again, this would just bring us into compliance with the fishery management plan.
Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, comment.
Division supports the proposal, makes us compliant with the ASMFC FMP.
Okay. Any questions for the council, for staff?
I'd like to make a motion. if I could.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to approve proposal 1 as stated here.
Second?
Second.
Seconded?
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Hearing no other questions or commentary, I'll go to the question. All those in favor of recommending to the director adoption of proposal 1 as notice for commercial Menhaden management, please raise your hand. Motion passes. On to the second one.
Okay, so the second proposal is an industry proposal, which would adopt a weekly possession limit of 120,000 pounds per vessel week, regardless of MMA status. And by way of background, we open up Narragansett Bay, which is a marine management area, based on overflights. This would allow for 120,000 pounds to be removed, regardless of whether it's open per week per vessel.
Go over to the division.
The division does not support the proposal as put forth here at 120,000. The council was looking to, consider other possession limits as either through the public hearing process or comment. That could be open for discussion, but at 120,000 pounds, we don't find that actually aligns with the intent of the current Menhaden management area. For background for the council, we've discussed it several times in the past, but just as a reminder, the Menhaden management area is a state-specific program. It's not part of the ASMFC FMP, but it is the result of a multi-year process of which stakeholders, managers, scientists met to devise a plan for the bay that met commercial, recreational, and ecological goals as defined by this, you all are Rhode Islanders. So, if there was a interest in trying to expand dramatically harvest for the area, I would prefer that the council and us together at large think of reviewing that whole process, going back through there and redefining those elements. I understand the basis of the proposal, based on bait issues and so on and so forth. Ultimately, the Menhaden management area is highly variable from year to year. 3 years ago, it rarely opened. In other extenuating circumstances, we had 0 landings. 2 years ago, we exceeded our quota. We achieved our quota and obtained transfers to allow us to harvest roughly over 60% of our annual quota. We got an increase in quota based on that and updating the quota allocation periods. So this proposal seeks to try and utilize that quota, which I understand, but at the current 120,000 pounds, that would not be supported by the division at this time. There's other proposals that we could discuss those as noticed, or as brought up in the public comment here in the hearing. The other thing I'll say is that just in terms of the variability, there are also years where we open and the fish maybe not marketable in terms of size. Last year we were open for quite some time and it just wasn't economically viable for the size class of fish that were here to actually harvest them. So I only bring these 3 years up is that it's super variable in terms of what we see. So we can be open and if not harvested, we can be open a little bit and wishing you're open more, or from an industry perspective, commercial harvest perspective, to utilize available fish here, or we can the Menhaden management area can open, meeting several goals both for the ecosystem as well as commercial catch, and even more so than previous years. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that variability because it's not always that if it's open, if we open it, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be more fish and result in more catch and vice versa. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but
I have a general question. Are we seeing additional proposals for Menhaden? Originally, like at the workshop, there were a bunch of them. Now it's been reduced just to these 2. Is that correct? Or do we have the workshop? We have proposal 3, proposal 4, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Dave. So there was a couple of things. There are other alternative possession limits that were proposed during the hearing that you'll see in the e-packet. Thing was 40,000, 50,000. There were other options to try and find compromise or still meet some bait needs for Rhode Island at a small volume, which you all could discuss. There were other proposals that were brought forth as to not do anything, stay status quo, as well as remove the Menhaden management area in its entirety, which the division did not support. outright, given the time and thoughtfulness that was put into establishing the area. And that it was more fruitful if there was a requested change that we as a community go through the appropriate process, discuss that again, as opposed to in a rushed fashion that allows for evaluating regional goals, code-wide goals, state goals amongst all sectors and ecosystem considerations. So I'm not sure if that was the spectrum.
Yeah, well, so I guess so we're not going to see any of the proposals we got to maintain immediately.
Well, the first one, yeah, the first one we dealt with, it was FMP related. This is specific to Rhode Island management, which, and I mean, in my understanding being the proposals coming at the spirit of commercial quota increase substantively for us, roughly 2 point something million to 4 point something million pounds.
I do ask the chair for clarification. If we don't want to do anything, we don't have to do anything, just not vote on this, correct? We don't have to make a proposal to not approve. Am I right in saying that?
No vote is allowed on this. But there would be no recommendation to the director. There would be no voice from the Marine Fisheries Council to weigh in on this matter towards the director. And
So
since
then-
it has been publicly noticed, he does have some authority to actually take action on it. So if there's no vote, or we could have a tie vote, or we could have no vote, but there would be no recommendation.
May I make a motion?
Yeah, there's one more question.
Is there a weekly measurement that the division would support? And I know that I remember hearing at the hearing, the person who had submitted this proposal said they could take a reduced rate. Is there any, do you have a number that the division would support?
So I think the compromise was towards 40,000, if I remember correctly, based on the ability to truckload in terms of what would actually be required on a given day to make it viable for truck and then leave. So if I hope I'm not mischaracterizing the proposer's intent there, but that was one of the options. My understanding for the council, they could pick anywhere between 0 and 120 that were, because the limit 120 was noticed. But there isn't a biological number at this point or a modeling effort that would say, here's how effort would change, here's what quota utilization. We don't have an anticipated way to predict what harvest would be and what that would result in. So 40 would certainly be more of an incremental step towards understanding that. I would say that, and likely address, local bait needs and such for various fisheries. I guess I would just say, if we think about the Menhaden management area, if we're thinking of substantive changes to how we operate, I would suggest we think about it in totality in the future in one shot instead of incremental changes over time, whether it be vessel size or weekly possession limits and such. My last comment would be I think 2 years ago it shows we can harvest a quota even if we don't have a weekly possession limit. But certainly this would allow for better, faster or improved utilization of what will become 4.2 some odd million pounds allocated to Rhode Island for this year.
So what was last year?
2.4 for the last few years, and then, but the year prior to last year, we had roughly 1.6 million pounds transferred to us to meet the needs.
Connor, if I can jump in, can you summarize the range of numbers that were offered through public comment?
Sure, and I'll look to Pete, maybe, I believe it was 120, and then someone had mentioned 40, and someone had mentioned 50, is my recollection from the hearing and what was the e-packet, as part of the public, as part of the hearing comments. But 120 was private workshop notice, with then the hearing, those additional possession limits.
So
I'd like to make a motion if I could.
No other comments or questions to the? Yeah, I'll get a motion going first, but I want to make sure you guys had any opportunity to weigh in on questions first. Yeah. You can go ahead.
Well, this is a model program we have in Narragansett Bay. It has provided us with enough fish for striped bass, bluefish, certainly not in the bay, but whales, dolphin. By the way, we had dolphins all the way up to Sabin Point 3 weeks ago. And this is a model program, and I just don't feel like we should fool around with it. I think that any additional fish needs study. I think that we should make an effort to work the numbers to see how many fish could be taken on a daily basis. But I think that needs time, analysis, and assessment. So I'd like to make a motion, if I may, to reject proposal 2, which is 120 pounds per vessel.
Do you have an alternative number to propose?
No,
Or just reject it?
Yeah.
Okay,
reject this.
okay. Is there a second? Okay. So I believe, so first I'll go to the council for any commentary, and then we have had the council members want to go out to public comment again on this. I will limit it, and I will be very narrow on this, because we did receive public comment on this. I don't want to be unfair to those who already had a chance to weigh in and not be here tonight as well. So to the council for any commentary on this motion.
I just think if we don't vote, if it does end up with this motion passing, it's 0. So it's implying that we should look into this for 2024. If it does become if it is a viable fishery, I hate to see, like everyone said, fish on the table. That we can, these guys have an opportunity to go fishing. There's a quota that's nothing.
I got a question for DEM. So what is status quo? What is the limit right now?
Well, it's only open when the area is open. That's the first thing, which this would say you could go.
When it's open?
Yep, and then when it's open, 120,000 pounds per day. Which, so this is an aggregate, this proposed would say, no matter what, you can fish per license or 120,000 pounds per week.
Okay.
And I guess just to clarify too, and not to. If the other vote could be to vote for status quo, as opposed to not support a proposal. Status quo would be as is.
That's sort of what I was getting at earlier, you know, I
Well,
didn't know how to
actually
hold.
gonna defer to Mr. McBride, so you have an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay, yeah, I think there's some merit to what Connor suggested, the 40,000 pounds being another sort of conservative amount, sort of would have given how these things, and that should support some fishery, but conservative enough that this can be studied and basically the stocks taken a look at for future years. So, you know, my philosophy would be to sort of have the fishery, but take it from the most conservative way that it has been proposed.
Do you want to weigh in?
No, it's just that no.
Okay. So I will go out to the public. I will start with you, and then I saw your hand up, so I'll go to you in the hopper, and then you will be third. Okay? I'll start with you.
My name is Eric Lorenzen, fishing vessel Menhaden. I made the proposal and I went for 120 because I figured I'd aim high and we could work down from there. I wrote a comment saying to the fact of 75,000 a week at a 25,000 daily limit, because the boat I have, I'm surveyed to hold 25,000. So that's why I'm a little worried about 40,000, because then I have to guesstimate the next day of what's in there, when I could just fill it twice and be done. Kind of makes it easy as far as law enforcement for me. And the survey I have, I can hand to an agent, he looks at the fish hole, it's 25,000, he's like, all right, you good. He doesn't have to sit there and wait for me to shovel the next day out, whatever's in there. But you have 4 million pounds you have to land, and I'm hoping to trickle, just open it up a little on a weekly limit, to just trickle it in to try to incentivize the local Rhode Island guys to get into it. Because I'm from Massachusetts, I started by hand hauling out of a 42-foot lobster boat. Now I have the same boat to go after with I'm like a medium-sized operation now. But I think if you allow them in the management area at a small limit, it'll incentivize the local guys to go buy nets and try to catch their own bait and start to get into it. The way it's set up now, this past year when I was there, it was only open one day in the spring, and it was tough. Other than that, I had to stay outside, and I kept driving outside, and it's deep water, open water. It's not easy to find them there. It's kind of more protected around the islands with weather, and the fish kind of like to tuck in and around the islands. I don't think there's going to be a gold rush of people running in to get into it and gobble it up if you just open it slowly and see what happens. 120 is a lot. It's a lot, so I ain't high. But I figured at 75,000 a week or 50,000 a week is more manageable, and it's not sucking the fish out of the bay per se. That's all I got.
Great, thank you.
Ken Mergo, Rhode Island Coastal Fisherman. My step back view of this fishery is that we have a fishery with fairly restrictive regulations that when it opens, it's wide open on 120,000 pounds. In order to comply with the regulations, it sort of limits the fishery to company-owned steel boats, 70 to 90 feet, and that's what we don't want to see today. What I would like to see as a Rhode Island fisherman is something more like Menhaden. They have a very fleet. They have 30, 40 foot fiberglass hull lobster boats that can carry from 5 to 25,000 pounds fishing. And in light of the fact that our quota is doubling, I think logically you can assume that we need to slightly, I'm not saying completely remove the rules, but relax the rules a little bit, allow a little bit more harvest to achieve our quota. As a fixed gear fisherman, I'm a consumer of bogies. I buy bogies from guys like Eric, and that is the most sustainable bait you can get. What's not sustainable is buying bait from 1,000 or 2,000 miles away that's flown or shipped across the country in a frozen pallet to get here. It's bait off the boat docked up next to me. Yeah, I think we have a resource and we need to use it.
Okay. Is that it?
Is that all right?
No.
That was quick. Okay.
Yeah. You have about two minutes left.
Yeah, so, it's an underutilized fish here. Almost every boat we have harvesting is out of state. The reason there's nobody in this state is you're talking minimum with a 5-figure investment. Nobody's gonna make that investment with a chance that it's not, a fishery is just not gonna open in the next year. One of the reasons I don't currently vote, because I never know year to year, is it gonna be year where it opens, year where it doesn't. I think having a controlled small fishery that is not a threat to the ecosystem role of Menhaden, that's year round and guaranteed, would give incentive to more Rhode Island guys to invest in this fishery, which we got a very big quota increase in. So we usually take cuts everywhere else. So it would be nice to see some sort of easing of the rules. And I think smaller daily and weekly limits would encourage more diversity, not just possibilities. And I know the division gets a ton of outcry when those boats go up the bay. I think the reaction would be different if it was more medium-sized local boats in the fishery than how it's currently configured.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Rich Hittinger, Rhode Island Saltwater Anglers. We would agree with not recommending proposal 2. So we would say we're against proposal 2 as the motion is. And I guess what I would say is I lived through a time when there were the Pogey Wars, and it was just awful out on the bay. It was bad. And the program that DEM implemented has really tamped that down a lot. I would be very reluctant to mess with that and to open it up for fishing in the management area when the division feels that there is not sufficient biomass to allow fishing. Now, some of these other ideas about less, a smaller limit, daily limit, and opening it up a bit more days, that might be something that should be evaluated. But at this point, I don't think we've got anything that's been public noticed along those lines. So I think those are the type of things that need to be developed further, possibly for next fishing season. Thank you.
Is there any, I'll go to Zoom and then I got one more hand in the room. Two more hands in the room. I'll leave it at 2 hands in the room and then I'll defer to Zoom first. Okay, so I'll take a final 2 comments on this. So by you and then in the very back, when you please stop.
Greg Vespi, Rhode Island Saltwater Anglers. I think the concern we would have is that it's regardless of the MMA status, and we're fully happy that the quota's been increased and we're happy for the commercial fishermen. But within the bay, if the MMA status is closed, then there's a reason for that. And so to allow more bogies to be taken out of there, to us, doesn't seem to make sense. So we wouldn't want to see something regardless of that status. And just to remind everybody, there's an entire recreational fishery with charter captains and recreational fishermen based on having abundant bogies in the bay, as opposed to out in the ocean and other places where they can still be caught and the quota can still be met. I get that it's a lot easier to chase them around in the bay, but it's not as if they can't be caught, and it's not as if the quota itself has changed. It's strictly the protections that are in the bay are there for a reason. And we would ask the council to please remember how hard everyone worked, including DM, to establish those limits and to back off on those limits now. No one from a science standpoint is saying that there's more bogies in the bay. We're just saying that the overall state's quota was increased. And we're using that as justification to take more bogies out of the bay. And that to me doesn't seem science-based.
Great, thank you. I'll take one final comment on this.
Yeah, I just want to start my opinion by saying thank you very much for everyone putting their time in on the subject. I'm a volume fisherman from Point Judith. And right now in Point Judith, we have a situation where our fleets have been consolidated to harvesting one species. And that species is a lot of squid and the Gila squid, and that's our state's biggest economic resource. And there's a real opportunity, I would like to piggyback about Eric's idea, to stimulate a socioeconomic positive movement in terms of buying the nets and buying the gear by allowing a small scale fishery to occur in the MMA. And one thing we're talking about the Providence River, the Narragansett Bay Kogi as a resident fish. Our fish is not a resident fish. And, if we don't catch our quota, we are going to transfer our quota to the next state, and that state's going to catch the quota. And there's a real opportunity here to decrease the effort and the concentration on our squid to participate in another volume fishery. And I really hope that one of our commercial fishing reps on the panel here can make a motion to allow a small scale 50,000 pound fishery. And I just see there's an opportunity that everyone can get what they want out of this, and still have the MMA and still allow some socioeconomic growth at the grassroots level. Like if this was happening, 50,000 pounds tomorrow, I know myself, I will go invest money at Superior Trawl to get a purse saying that. But if we don't allow this, we're stunting growth for our local economic. All right, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, we have a motion where we'll take no further public comment. We do have a lot more to get through. We're cruising along, so hang in there with me. Right now, the motion's on the floor as it stands. Is there any commentary or objections to going before the vote on the council?
Jason?
Yeah, I think it's unfair. You know, the tough part about this job is what we're doing here is finding balance. And it's sometimes almost impossible, but eliminating a fishery completely doesn't make any sense. And I think it's unfair to the smaller vessels, the smaller fishermen. You know, we have a lot of mid-size trawlers, a lot of mid-size boats that would really benefit from a small Menhaden fishery. So to do this, you're pretty much eliminating a chance for them to do it at all. And fishing season starting, I'm sorry, but diesel's gonna be $5. Nothing's gonna be cheap. And we can't depend on squid forever, because that may change overnight. If that ever happens, God forbid, point shoot, it's gonna be a ghost town. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I mean, this is an opportunity to get more people fishing. You double the quota and we're not, you know, and this is an opportunity for a lot of people to go to work. I would like to. If possible, I'd like to amend the motion to add.
I'll second.
Sorry, could you just speak up what?
Amend the motion to, I won't word it properly.
Oh, just the number.
Oh, 50,000.
50,000.
So, and it's been seconded by Mike Rice to amend the motion to not adopt proposal 2, but to recommend to the director 50,000 pounds for commercial Menhaden management. Is that right, Nicole?
Yep.
I'll give you a minute to catch up. Okay. So but while she's doing that, so
Just so it's clear, when people can, okay,
Point of order. We have a motion on the table. Is there a second to that one?
yes, Mr. Rice seconded the motion.
Too quiet.
Mr. Rice.
just so it's clear, people can fish in the bay. There's a cap. So if the biomass goes below is 1 million.
1.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.5, the bay opens. I mean, that still happens, so there's still a fishery allowed. The recreational fishery is reliant on Menhaden being in the bay, absolutely reliant. Charter boats fish in the bay in the springtime because of the Atlantic Menhaden. If we're saying that folks are gonna be allowed to fish and ignore the biomass cap, that's going to be very harmful to the recreational fishing. I think it would make much more sense to allow DEM to study this issue to see what kind of impact is. 50 might not be enough. Maybe it should be 100. Maybe it should be 20. But to do it without study, I think is really detrimental. We have a program that works. We have a cap in place for a reason. It's a model program nationally. There, other folks are looking at this program and have used it, model programs for other species because it works. The biomass goes up in the bay, the fishing opens. It closes if the biomass drops in the bay. We're still allowing, as Mr. Vespi pointed out, if we have more quota, those fish can be caught. They can be caught anywhere. But the management area in the bay is in place for a reason. That's because of detrimental in this.
I will go to Connie, did you have a hand raised, but if not, I could refer to Nicole.
I remember now. I think I was just a point of clarification. That it's, I think it's a substitution.
It's a motion to substitute.
Right, okay, so just wanted to,
Thank you.
yeah,
Because it's the opposite.
amend looks to change, does not look to change the substance of the motion. Substitute is an entirely different motion. I think similar outcome, but different verbiage.
That's correct. Nicole?
I just wanted to clarify, the biomass, threshold for opening is 2 million, for closing is 1.5. So once we reach 2 million, we open. If it drops below 1.5, we close. And once we're open, the commercial fishery can only harvest 50% of the biomass that's above 1.5 million. So there's also that harvest cap.
All right. So is there any other commentary from the council? You ready to hear the question on the motion to substitute to recommend to the director adoption of proposal 2 for commercial menhaden management with the following modification of weekly possession limit to 50,000 pounds. All those in favor? 3 opposed. So the motion to substitute passes. So this is the motion on the floor now.
I don't see that again. See the hand, second set of hands.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have Mr. Jarvis, Mr. D'Angelo, Kitty Egan, and Mr. Red. So the motion passes 4-3. So the motion to substitute is now the motion on the floor before the council of recommending to the director the adoption of proposal 2 with the weekly possession limit of 50,000 pounds. Is everyone ready for the question? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 opposed. The motion passes. Okay, we are moving.
Make a clarification that this is regardless of the management area status, so is it now going to be 50 pounds per week all the time? Or is when the management area is open with 120,000 pounds a day, 50 pounds, and when it's not open, 50 pounds, 50,000 pounds a week?
So as, yeah, I might take a whack at it, but can you clarify? So the first motion was to vote on the area, so, right? And then the second motion was the amount. So it walks hand in hand, the rule as proposed, it just split up as both. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jeff, the latter. So if it's open, it's 120,000 pounds a day. If it's closed, there's still the 50,000 pound weekly.
Okay,
Is proposed in notice.
the word regardless of the MMA status might not be the best choice to word that. Regardless implies that it doesn't
Right, 50,000.
matter.
Right, yes. Or else it's open. Right.
Okay, so we're moving on to non-substantive proposed amendments to part 3 finfish. Go ahead, John.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. So we have some house cleaning items. I'm gonna go 1, 3, 4, 2. So first, we have for recreational summer flounder, we are fixing an error that moved minimum size in the possession limit section. For Menhaden, we're just changing some of the language to clarify some of the rules. For striped bass, erroneously, we dropped the word possession from a closed day clause, which we are putting back in to make the closed days effective. And then finally, the last bit is to move our winter 1 aggregate program for summer flounder from part 3 finfish to a new part 23, which is aggregate programs for summer flounder and black sea bass. This is not the pilot. This is not the pilot program, as we will discuss next. This is just us moving our aggregate programs into 1 reg part 23. No substantial change.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, so this one might have said, has anyone objected adopting this as proposed? All in favor, say aye. Okay, the motion passes, or the language is adopted as consented. Sorry. Okay, so now we are going to get into the aggregate program for summer flounder and black sea bass. Great. I will go to John first, and then I will describe how we're gonna handle these motions one by one. Okay, so go ahead, John.
All right, So now up on the agenda is to discuss our pilot program for summer flounder and black sea bass. We are discussing whether to make this into a full opt-in program. It's been operating as a pilot, as many know, since 2019. So the way we're going to go through it is we're going to present some background on the pilot program, a brief summary of the research pilot aggregate program performance during the 3-year period, and then go through the notice part 23 rule. So in this new part 23 is winter 1. We are also proposing to put if the program is adopted, the rules for it in part 23 as well. And I plan to do so will be part of that explanation as well. So the background here, I see that many of you have been to a lot of the meetings that we've had. So this is a program. The purpose of the pilot program was to assess whether or not a new management scheme for the summer and fall periods for fluke and black sea bass could work for our quota management. A change from a traditional daily possession limit to one based on weekly limits. This is outside of the winter 1 season. This would be the pilot took place between May 1st and December 31st. We started this in 2019. When we started it, we only had 18 available permits, which were broken out into 6 gear types. And the purpose here was to see the effect of gear type on quota consumption and how the fishing behavior would change based on a weekly limit. The possession limits for the first year were 7 times the daily limit for both species. In 2020, it was the pilot was continued for an additional 2 years. So for 2020 and 2021, we upped the program by up to 36 available permits, but we did keep them in those 6 gear type categories. Once again, to study how the quota would be consumed, as well as how fishing behavior might change based on a weekly limit. Last year, we did put the question before the council to adopt it as a full-on opt-in program. It was recommended to study it as a pilot for 1 more year. So we extended the pilot. We did remove the gear type restriction and increase the number of permits to 59 vessels. Another change that we did do was to change the black sea bass weekly limit to one based on 5 days, not on 7 days. So we reduced the weekly limit for sea bass, and that was to slow down the quota consumption rate. So a brief summary of the, so once again, in your e-packet, you will see all of the analysis we've done on the program. We also presented it at the workshop as well. You'll also find a paper that our Deputy Chief, Julia Livermore, did, where she interviewed all of the participants and did a socioeconomic, well, a social analysis of the program. That is all in your e-packet. In general, the program resulted in participant fishing fewer days in the program compared to those fishing outside of the program. So people fishing in aggregate mode had less trips during the aggregate season. So we see this as a benefit. Fewer trips means that people are fishing more efficiently. They're consuming less fuel, and they're using their time more efficiently. They're offered flexibility to choose the days that they are going to go out and fish. This also factors into better safety at sea, not having to go on a marginal weather day. Also, any fishing trip has bycatch associated with it. By having less trips, there is less bycatch as well. As far as the quota utilization is concerned, we had very few early closures during this period. And the ones that we did close, notably in black sea bass, were in the periods where when we have low quota allotments for this period, they would close. They have closed historically under a daily regime as well as under a weekly regime. In fact, for some of our limits, we actually were increasing in the fall to make sure we got all of the fish in the quota. I will say that's the simulation of how the quota could be consumed has indicated that some discussion will have to be done in the future if adopted to look at sub periods with small allotments and to And to maybe adjust either the allotments or starting possession limits, whatever tools are in the toolbox accordingly. If adopted, we see this as part of the annual discussions of our summer flounder and sea bass specifications. And then finally, the structured interviews were overwhelmingly positive for all of the people that were in the program.
Okay. So, next slide. So how we're going to handle this aggregate program is we're going to break this up. So the rule as noticed was one rule, but where the council is going to take smaller bites of this apple and rule on separate motions throughout the rule, and then we will take one full motion together. So on each item, you have some options. Recommend adoption as proposed by the division, recommend adoption with modifications as discussed, and then recommend no adoption of each section. So we're going to break this up into 7 parts. As you can see, general eligibility, general permit conditions, winter 1, program eligibility, program permit conditions, possession limits, and the summer fund or exemption certificate. So we'll go one by one. So the first one we're going to address is general eligibility. So I'm going to go to John first, discuss general eligibility.
Sure.
And then I'll have Connor weigh in, and then we'll go for the council for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to echo, so based on John's proposal, John's, background, the division supports the pilot aggregate moving forward as a part of regular fisheries management. So moving away from a pilot, adopting it in regulation as part of our, as a special program, but as part of our, what we will now manage annually for fluke and sea bass commercially. So I just wanted to emphasize that, and we particularly are supportive of moving out of the pilot. We feel confident after 4 or 5 years now of the pilot and testing various things that we as a division are ready to move forward with the program. A lot of that we'll be walking through, will be, pretty key elements that you'll decide on how it looks. But, I wanted to emphasize our support of the program, and that by adopting in rules, this is something that we wouldn't necessarily be set in stone forever. We would annually adopt it just like we do for seasons, possession limits, sector or sub-period allocation and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage, migrating from pilot to permanent or more permanent rule, to get into our regular stream of management of sea bass and fluke annually. Thanks.
So we'll go to John to start the first section.
Sure. So the first section concerns general eligibility. Just a quick reminder, remember that this is going into part 23, which will apply to both winter 1 and, if adopted, the summer fall aggregate. So this is general ability for both winter 1 and summer fall. Anytime you see something in red, that is something that is a deviation from the original pilot rules. For general eligibility for both winter 1 and summer fall, no changes to the fact that applicants will have to hold a valid commercial fishing license if fishing in state waters. Vessel operator has to hold a valid landing permit if fishing in federal waters. So the applicant or vessel operator must not have been assessed a criminal or administrative penalty for violations of state or federal commercial fishing regulations or laws within the past 3 years. That is a change. That rule has always been in effect for winter 1. However, we did not have that requirement to enter into our pilot program. Also, applicants must be in compliance with commercial fishing data reporting requirements, as well as all the vessels must be commercially declared within the state of Rhode Island. Now, we also did get an additional industry proposal on general eligibility for consideration. It was proposed by industry, a member of industry, that participation in the winter 1 program, a vessel can participate in the winter 1 program or the summer fall program, not both. And by way of background, when we did have a similar management scheme back in the past, this is how it operated.
Great. So is there any question from the council on just this one section, general eligibility?
I have a question for John. John, so you were saying if you're in winter one, you can't be in winter two?
So that's not the division proposal, but there was an industry proposal that.
I thought I heard you say that it was in place right now.
Sorry, actually, it's not in place right now because the pilot has expired, so we have no summer fall aggregate.
Last year, if we're in winter one, we could participate in the summer.
Oh, I see. No, so, sorry, no.
Okay.
Last year, no, we did not restrict winter one vessels from the program. They were allowed in. We had an aggregate program in the 2000s for summer, which did have that rule. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
And John, if you could just make sure to clarify for everyone on the council, including me. So the proposal is this right here. It does not restrict both,
That is the division, the division proposal.
but the industry does restrict both.
Yes, they are proposing to only allow to basically make a vessel choose whether they want to be winter one or the summer fall aggregate.
Great. Questions on general eligibility or general program? Okay, so I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the general eligibility program outlined here as the division recommends. Second.
By Mr. Wright. Any commentary? Jason?
Yeah, I just want to, again, reiterate, does that include participation in winter one or is that a separate vote?
So that's kind of the big question here is do you allow a winter one boat to participate in summer fall in addition to winter one? So our proposal does not have that stipulation, but an industry member said their proposal would be to choose one or the other. So yeah,
Okay, so
winter
that would
one
be
could be
separate.
both, yes.
Jason, so the motion is the division proposal, not the industry one. Okay. All right, so is everyone ready for the question on this one? All right. All those in favor of recommending to the director adoption of general eligibility requirements as noticed in part 23 aggregate program for summer flounder and black sea bass, raise your hand. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, unanimous. Motion passed. All right, one down, just to go, let's do it. So we're on to general permit conditions.
So the next section is for general permit conditions. Again, these would apply to both winter one and a summer fall aggregate on both species. So here participants must maintain compliance with commercial fishing data reporting requirements. The permits are non-transferable. Participants and participating vessels must adhere to all applicable rules and regulation governing commercial fishery operations, included but not limited to mesh size restrictions, offloading hours, at-sea transfers, and reporting and record keeping requirements. The long-winded way of saying you got to follow the rules that are already in place. And now possession limits are in the current program, so subjected to change throughout the season. That'll be the same as going forward. So one difference here is that the division proposal is that possession limits may revert back to a daily limit once 90% of the sub-period quota for each species is projected to have been reached. This is a little different in that this is the current trigger for our winter one aggregate program. However, the pilot program had a more conservative trigger of 80%.
Okay.
We did have an industry proposal on the general permit conditions for the summer fall period. And that is to keep the conservative trigger of 80% for both species as the point to revert back to a daily limit from a week.
Are there any questions for the division?
So John, is the division recommendation 20%?
The division is this one right here. We are recommending to go to 90% for both species.
Why 90 is located a bit less conservative?
If I may, if we go to 80, it would close earlier. Typically at the end of the fall, we're trying to we're looking to catch fluke. So if we close earlier, it would exacerbate the catching of fluke issue that we typically have in the fall. But it's more concern. I think the 80 is more at the heart for black sea bass, by understanding the original proposer's thoughts, but the 90 is A, consistent with what we have for winter one, and B, doesn't further exacerbate our efforts to try and utilize the quota.
Do you think 80 would be better for black sea bass?
Maybe. Sorry. Yeah, that could, you could operate for different species if you wanted to. I would think. We just have to specify that in the rule, make it clear.
That's right.
I'd like to make the motion to basically have the division recommendation here as the motion. It's that first, yeah, second.
Second, okay. Nicole, do you mind putting that up so I can say it quickly? So the motion on the floor is to adopt with the recommended, adopt the general permit conditions as noticed for summer flounder and black sea bass. Is there any commentary from the council or questions, Jason?
I would just err on caution rather than 90%. I think it should be 80%. Yeah. That's a motion.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you want a motion to amend?
I'm happy to state that.
Yeah, you're
Wait
good.
till 4 a.m.
All right, do you want to state it just for the?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to amend so that it's 80% rather than 90.
Do we have second to Mr. D'Angelo? Okay. Nicole.
Sorry, just trying to clarify, so the motion of the general permit conditions applies to both species and both aggregate programs. So if you change it to 80%, that would change it for winter one.
So just for the summer.
Just for the
Yes.
So this is the motion to amend and it's been seconded by D'Angelo. Is there any commentary on the motion to amend?
Species, Jason, is that?
For both.
Connor?
Just a clarification from Mr. Jarvis. So with the 80%, it's respective to each species though. So like they might be in the same program, but when your intent is when black sea bass goes to 80, only that reverts.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Okay, because they're managed right now in the same pilot program or the same aggregate program, so.
And again, it comes down to if we accept all of it at the end of all of this discussion. So that's the other piece. But we'll get it.
So I will typically only take commentary from the public if it's requested, but there is one question from the public. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If I could.
Two questions.
So I've got angst over this whole quick, but my question is, winter and summer fluke exemption permits, will those disappear with this program?
No.
So
That's to be discussed among the
Okay, so
council.
this would be an extra 68 people on top of that exemption program that's already in.
Sorry, the pilot program right now has 58 members, I believe. If this were, depending on how the council decides to move forward, they could adopt to have it in perpetuity with open entry. So there could be additional people, but there are requirements like that we would propose, like you have to have a BMS unit, like the current pilot, which is another level of restriction, but yeah.
But my point to the council, to be able to make an educated decision, you folks know how many people participating in the winter one, the exemption program and the summer exemption program. How this is going to affect the fishery by adding this many people.
I'm sorry.
I hate to be an angst on this, but this is going to change our whole fishing operation.
No, we were gonna take comment one at a
Okay,
time,
I'm done.
and I will
Thank you.
take limited comment on something that's been publicly noticed. I know this is a contentious thing, so we're gonna take very piecemeal steps at this. Thank you, Mr. Booth. I will take Mr. Broderick, if you had commentary for a moment?
Yeah, next question for Scott. How many participants do we have in the winter one?
John, I believe we had somewhere around 43 to 45. Something like
And
that.
probably 10 or more didn't even participate because of the poor prices. Okay.
I will go to the gentleman back here.
Bob Morris, Mr. President. I would love to have the availability of a public citizen to send that comment on the last item that you have on board. I don't know, because I'm kind of confused, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't get it, but if I'm not mistaken, you voted in that you could have both the winter and the summer as an aggregate program. Regardless if you were winter, in other words, you couldn't pick from either, is that correct?
So Nicole, can you pull up the motion that passed previously? And so this is the one that was already voted on. Now, just to clarify, this was publicly noticed and heard previously. So there was opportunity and there was overwhelming public comment on this earlier this month. So I will make that as a point of order just to note, but also to handle this program and to be a cautious stepwise process in this program in total, we're breaking them up individually. And then the council will vote as a whole on the programs together. So there's the only reason we're breaking this up is because there's so many individual pieces of it. So this first motion that passed to recommend to the director was to can I go to the division slide? Sorry. This was the proposal that passed. And it included both, is that correct? Connor?
That's correct.
Okay.
But to Mr. Morris, the council could still discuss those elements via possession limit. For example, winter one participants or not. So there's other opportunities that winter one participants can participate per the last vote. To what degree it could still be discussed by the council.
So that
To keep the folks can, if you're on the winter aggregate program, you can also be now, because it's been taken out of the books. Where before, you could either be either one or the other. So now, you just voted that they can be both. So now you can have the large offshore vessel come in here, get 2,100 pounds on the beach and fish out the recreation as well as the small commercial fishermen's fish. That's what you just voted on, and you said, yes.
Not yet.
For that.
okay, so I'm gonna step.
I didn't understand, yes. I get what
I'm
you're saying.
gonna stop everything at
Well,
this exact moment. And I'm going to respectfully take no public comment on a matter that is already settled and has already been heard. And we will continue on to the next sections and allow the council to vote individually on it. And then I will allow the council to vote on the program as a whole. And there are many opportunities for the council to weigh in and go to the public if they request it on other sections. But this matter has already been settled and we're going to move forward. So on the,
What is that tracking machine? That's what it's all.
so on the matter before
Well,
us right now, 1 second, okay? Can we go to the matter before us? Okay, great. So this is on the motion to amend for the council at this moment. This is, we have not voted on the motion to amend, and that's where we're at this moment. I will take one final public comment from Mr. Carvalho, and then I will go to the council.
The industry put in a motion, a proposal to not have aggregate landings in the summer. We're going through all the particulars. I didn't see that motion listed, but there was very strong support, overwhelming support from industry, both recreational and commercial, not to have aggregate landings in the summer. That should have been the first proposal to vote on. And that would determine whether you'd go through all the rest of the individual proposals, because they're all related to the principle of whether industry is going to accept aggregate lands in the summertime. I went to the workshop meetings, and the strongest position expressed by industry, both recreational, commercial, and otherwise, was not to have aggregate landings in the summertime. We didn't need it in particular, especially with fluke, with summer flounder, based on the possession limits that are now established. So to go through this whole process for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, and then to turn around and go back to address that major question, the major question should have been put on the table first. And if it was accepted, then you can follow through with all these sub issues.
Thank you. Okay,
You've had someone on Zoom.
I didn't get my 2 minutes.
On Zoom, we'll go to Derek.
I will take no further public comment from the floor. Thank you. Zoom is unusable.
Yeah, you understand, so that I stole it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I did miss the last meeting. I was at the workshop, but and I apologize if it was brought up then, but it up until this point, I thought it was only the summer flounder that you had to choose between the winter period and the summer period. I didn't know. Is this new that you have to choose with the black sea bass as well?
I will defer to the division.
I mean,
Yeah.
just Derek, you don't have to pick, I guess is the result of the last vote. As of now, if the program were to be in perpetuity, which the council will vote at the end, you would not have to pick winner one for either species. But it was much more discussed, you're right, it was much more extensively discussed over the last 4 years in the context of fluke, as opposed to black sea bass.
Okay, but if they did vote this way, you would not have to pick.
Correct.
Okay. So essentially, if you did have to choose, you wouldn't be able to participate in the sea bass fishery at all in the winter, correct?
I'm sorry, say that one more time for me.
So if it did come down to where you had to choose, you wouldn't be able to fish for sea bass at all in the winter if you chose to participate in the summer aggregate?
I believe the council could choose to have that specific 2 species, like there's a number of ways you could do it. You could say, if you're in winter one, you can't be in summer fall aggregate. You can be in either, or you could be by species if the council so choose, or made that requirement specific to fluke only. Essentially, that could be any number of combinations. But that's not what was voted.
Madam Chair, if I could clarify, currently for black sea bass in the winter one period, we have a weekly possession limit. There's no need to join any special program to participate. You're just allowed to fish on a weekly level during winter one. So there'd be no need to choose between the weekly possession limit in the winter for sea bass and whatever it is for the summer, as that is not an opt-in, it's just a general regulation.
Okay, that clarifies it. Yeah, all right, because there was a weekly limit, so that's what I was getting at. If you could even participate at all, but all right, that answers my question then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the motion to amend for the general permit conditions for summer flounder and black sea bass, there's a motion to amend to recommend to the director the program as the division as amended with the trigger of 80% for the summer fall program. So hearing no other commentary, are we ready for the question to vote on the motion to amend? All those in favor of amending the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, motion passes. The motion on the floor is to recommend to the director the adoption of general permit conditions as noticed in part 23 with a modified trigger of 80% for the summer fall program. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, okay. So 4 up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You raise your hand. Okay, 5. So 5 to 2, motion passes. You got to be confident in that. I don't know. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carvalho. Okay, on to the next section, which is winter one program.
All right, thank you. So, again, we're taking, winter one out of part three, putting it into part 23. So we are just showing that we are keeping the winter one program, with no changes proposed. Once again, to be eligible for winter one summer flounder aggregate, you must, if you're in federal waters, you must hold a summer flounder moratorium, permit from NOAA Fisheries and a Rhode Island summer flounder exemption certificate, which is issued in part 14 of our rules. Also, the vessel operator, if harvesting summer flounder from state waters, must hold a valid summer flounder exemption certificate. So that's if you're state only, you still have to have the cert. The winter one season, no changes proposed, first full week in January through April 30th. And then the possession limit, once again, no changes proposed, starting at 4,000 pounds per vessel by week.
Okay,
That goes up really good. There were no industry proposals.
there was no industry proposal. Is there questions from the council for John or the division? Okay, oh, right.
I move adoption of that division.
For a second. Jason? Okay,
If there's no change to the law, is that what that is? There's no change to the present system?
so that is a good clarification. So, John, do you want to make sure that there's no change to the system that was previously in the pilot that is now a proposed rule?
So winter one was not part of the pilot. It's just being combined in the same regulation potentially as the pilot. There are no changes to the winter one program proposed.
So why are we voting on it if there's no changes?
So we are voting on each section because this is a proposed rule. So there is no longer an aggregate program because it has phased out, if that's correct, Connor?
Well, the aggregate program for the winter fishery is in existence and there's no proposal to change it. So it shouldn't even be included in this because it already existed, it exists under the present regulation.
So let me go to Connor to clarify.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The whole rule went out to notice. So that's why we're going through it now, because the ultimate goal, if the council were to adopt the summer/fall aggregate, would be to put it into part 23 with what is currently housing the winter one program.
So basically the proposal is not changed.
For this part, yes. Yeah, so.
Okay, is there any questions from the council? Are you guys ready for the question? All those in favor of recommending to the director the proposal as noticed for the aggregate program for summer flounder and black sea bass, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6-0, motion passes. On to the next item.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is to discuss aggregate program eligibility for the summer fall black sea bass summer flounder season. So this is eligibility, how you would opt into the program. So summer fall program eligibility applies to both species, no changes from the pilot. So we would still require that if the vessel is harvesting summer flounder in federal waters, hold a summer flounder federal moratorium permit. Applicant vessels shall agree to install a division-approved vessel monitoring system, VMS device on their vessels, and the cost of which, both the cost of the device and continued airtime, would be the responsibility of the participant. Any applicant vessels would agree to submit their catch and effort information through a division-approved electronic reporting application. Once again, the cost of which would be the responsibility of the participant. Although it should be noted, these programs are free. It really only be the hardware you're reporting it on. And then applicant vessels may be required to take a state or federally authorized observer. That's a condition for just having a fishing license in Rhode Island. And second of all, for the summer and fall season, we would so for the summer fall aggregate season, we propose no changes to the season. The program would run from May 1st to December 31st. We had no industry proposals on eligibility for the summer fall aggregate.
Is there any questions?
I'd like to make a motion to,
Do you have? Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the summer fall eligibility in season as outlined here.
Second,
Second.
seconded. All right, is everyone ready for the question, commentary? Okay, so all those in favor to recommend to the director adoption of the summer fall program eligibility and season as noticed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 3, the motion passes. I will not be taking public comment at this time. All right, moving on.
Okay, so this is concerning the so this is the permit conditions for the summer fall aggregate for fluke and black sea bass. You're gonna see a little redundancy here. Eligibility is what you agree to get into the program. The conditions are what you have to maintain to stay in the program. So again, we are proposing no change from the pilot that a VMS device and reporting application shall be maintained in operational order and be actively engaged at all times. Malfunctioning of any device will result in permanent suspension until the device is returned to operational order. Participants shall document catch and network information through division-approved electronic application prior to offload. Participating vessels may be required to take any state or federally authorized observer, and the permit may be terminated by the participant at any time by submitting a request to the department. However, once terminated, a participant may not reapply for the aggregate program during the same fishing year. That was a rule in place during the pilot. No one opted to avail themselves of it. We did have an industry proposal for general permit conditions. And this was and that if you are participating in the aggregate program, you cannot have a small mesh net on board when fishing in aggregate mode. We do have small mesh rules already in place. This was to further strengthen them.
Okay, is there any questions from the council? Connor, would you like to weigh in on this? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So when we're voting on this one, we're including the industry proposal along with it, or are these two separate ones?
And so right now on the table, I believe, is the division proposal, which does not include any restrictions on what nets you can have on board.
Okay.
So there is no motion.
Oh, sorry. So, okay.
Yep. Is there any questions from the council for the division? Gerard?
Yeah, on the second slide, Nicole. All right, what the federal regulation is, are both the fish and the EEZ, most of these food probably be caught in the EEZ, not on the beach. We're able to keep small mesh on the boat, we have to have it stowed. And then fish with our 5.5 inch bag or 6 inch mesh bag. So I would recommend that we do away with this proposal.
So, thanks, Mike, for clarification, just to not include this industry proposal as part of the previous slide.
Mr. Rice, you had a question? Okay. Okay, hearing no other questions or commentary, is there a motion?
I move to adopt the division proposal and sort of leave the industry mesh proposal behind.
Okay, second, Mr. Roderick?
Yep.
Any question or commentary? Jason?
Yeah, I guess part of what came up in a lot of the workshops and discussion was the temptation of this opening up the beach to bigger boats, more than we already have. And I guess this is something that wasn't, I should have brought up earlier, because again, this has been so time consuming and confusing. If we go back to the beginning of all this, it was, and don't mind my voice and tore my throat, right? We didn't get to make a decision on whether you could choose winter aggregate or summer. Which I think we probably should have dealt with that. in the beginning of this. The other part of it that I haven't brought up yet, but needs to be brought up is I was a proponent for this when it first came out 4 years ago. One of the reasons was fluke was 50 pounds a day. Now it's 300 pounds a day. We don't have an economist in the room to sit here and talk about it, but to give you an example of something, a friend of mine fishes out of Virginia, another one fishes out of Georgia. I know the price of fluke right now is $1. This past winter, 60,000 pounds of fluke landed in Virginia at 50 cents. So you take your boat from Virginia to the canyon, you grab 60,000 pounds, you go back to Virginia, you get $3,000. So if we're gonna turn this into a fishery of 2,100 pounds a week, besides the impact on the population, which I've spent a little too much time studying this, it's hurting my skull. I'm pretty sure the stock is starting to decline. The recruitment is starting to decline. Everybody that fishes on the beach, rod and reel, knows that these fish are not available. This could be a nail in the coffin. And I think Jerry brought something up earlier. I think we need to go back. Anytime there's an experiment or a pilot, if you change the numbers, it changes everything. So from 50 pounds, 100 pounds to 300 pounds is a big, big difference. And this came up in a few other discussions. We have a lot of other things that are going to have to come up at some point in our lifetime in these fisheries. We have separate fisheries in the state. You have guys that fish from shore, you have guys that fish out of a little skiff, you have guys that, up to Goodman's boats, 160-foot boats. But we all have the same regulations. So the rod and reel guys aren't catching 300 pounds fluke a day. They were lucky to get 60 pounds last year. So that's just, I got to bring that up as a concern that any experiment, any type of pilot is pretty much null and void if you literally change the numbers times 4 or times 3. So we went from 50 to 100 pounds, from 100 pounds to 300 pounds. So we've tripled the daily limit. And without an economist sitting in the room, there's no way we're going to see the impact of this. I mean, I don't want to go fishing for fluke and get paid 50 cents. And I think it's absolutely asinine to even move forward with this. It just, and again, I guess that's the part of this that bugs me the most is this is a volunteer position sitting here. We don't get paid to do this. But I happen to care about this, or I wouldn't be sitting here, like I've said many times. Excuse me, I used to be the guy sitting out there yelling at everybody. This could cause some serious problems. If you think recruitment's bad now. I didn't get a chance to, I was on vacation, to see how many fish were landed in Virginia and the Carolinas, but I believe the Carolinas just closed their fluke fishing. I don't think they're accepting, not what they were anyway. It's something else. I mean, I'm getting educated. My brother Mike had informed me, he spent a lot of time out doing this. I didn't realize how many fish you can catch offshore and how many states you can land them in if you have a preference. So you can fish West Atlantis and you could grab your limit for New York, Virginia, the Carolinas, Connecticut, and Rhode Island if you have all those. But all the fish are caught right out here in West Atlantis or somewhere in the canyons up in the north here. So I don't know, that's just my concern that I think we're jumping up on the amount of fish that, I mean, the daily limit of these fish 3 times what we did during pilot program. So 2,100 pounds at 50 cents for a big boat, sure, that pays a fee. 2,100 pounds or 300 pounds a day at 50 cents for a small boat, you're going to go back to carpentry or plumbing or whatever else you might be. So I just had to make that statement. And I feel better now.
So I will clarify that we are going through each of these as broken up as a point of order. We're going through broken up each element. There is still an opportunity for the council to weigh in on the proposal as a whole. So if you are feeling as though you wanted to make a motion at any point on the full final motion and there are elements that you did not like to see or want to see, there's an opportunity to weigh in on the program as a whole at the very end. But it's better to break up piecemeal so that we're not kind of amending willy-nilly. So there is that opportunity.
This hasn't been, my voice is still loud.
So, if there's no other comment, I'm gonna ask the question on this motion, which was, okay. So all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the summer fall program permit conditions as noticed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 3, the motion passes. On to the next one.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. The next one is concerning possession limits for the proposed summer fall aggregate for summer flounder and black sea bass. The division proposal is for summer flounder to have a weekly possession limit based on 7 times the daily limit. There's no change from the pilot there. However, the division does propose one change from the pilot, and that is to require a summer flounder exemption certificate for a vessel to possess more than 200 pounds per day, or as you'll see coming up, we do have a proposal to increase that to 300. So to be clear, anyone could participate in the program, regardless of whether they had a summer flounder certificate. However, to possess more than the summer flounder certificate limit, they would have to hold that summer flounder certificate. That's a change from the pilot. For black sea bass, the division proposes what we had going for the pilot this last season, and that's a weekly limit based on 5 times a day. We did have some additional proposals from industry for both summer flounder and black sea bass possession limits. So for summer flounder, one industry proposal was to not require a summer flounder exemption certificate to possess more than 200 pounds or 300 if amended. So basically to keep fishing as we did in the pilot program without that requirement. We had an alternative proposal based on fluke certs as well. And that was to have a weekly limit, which is based on 7 times the daily limit. However, in a single day, a vessel may only be in possession of 1/2 of the weekly limit per or the maximum daily limit allowed, whichever is greater. And my understanding is that if they did not hold a fluke exemption certificate. So if you have a fluke exemption certificate, you could fish the full weekly all in one go. If you did not, you would have to do it in 2 trips, at least 2 trips. You can only have half the limit if you did not have a fluke cert. That's an industry proposal. Another industry proposal also looked at mesh size, but approached it from a possession limit standpoint. And that is if you are fishing with small mesh and you have more than 250 pounds of squid on board your vessel, you are limited to 100 pounds of summer flounder per day. We had 2 industry proposals for the sea bass weekly limit. One was to increase it to 7 times the daily limit for all periods. The other one was to increase it to 7 times the daily limit for the summer periods only. That would be between May 1st and August 15th.
Okay. Connor?
I just wanted to highlight, based on some of the comments heard today, like the council could amend if they see fit in several directions. I think one good example of that is the black sea bass proposal of different possession limits by fall and summer and fall. There could be other requirements in terms of total allowed catch within the weekly if you're in winter and in the summer. Like there could be other things. I guess I just would stress for the council to think through different options. We're bringing forth from the pilot what we had, in part because with a participation list of 58 people, it worked. We didn't run into quota issues for either species this past year. So if there is concern though in the future of size of vessels participating, reduce quota in the future, I guess I would urge people to think about ways that would allow for considering those risks, how the program could operate within them. You could also, you know, if there was angst over one species or the other, we can also talk through that as well within this. So I just urge the council to think through some of these elements. To the summer flounder exemption certificate, I just wanted to speak to that, particularly because, you know, as I've mentioned in hearings and in workshops, the council, the department has evaluated whether or not to require, get rid of the program altogether at times. It's been my understanding, industry has not wanted the certificate to be exempt or removed from fisheries management for Rhode Island. So by upping the 300 to 300 for the certificate, we were trying to meet the needs of both those who don't have it and who would want to opt in the summer and participate, as well as still providing or maintaining the value of those who have a summer certificate. Again, there could be other things the council could consider. Is that number adequate, 300, in terms of modification to allow for summer participants to come in and operate in the fishery as part of the program? Should, you know, you could all decide to have it be applicable for summer or fall only, as well as winter one, but you know, the division feels as though the certificate program currently has to be a part of the fluke fishery for Rhode Island. And quite frankly, with the concern about concern about quota utilization, it is still a measure which allows for restricting catch, particularly designed for out-of-state land harvesters, but people coming in and landing. But ultimately, it is a tool that would be available and is available, as you all know, that to limit catch as needed and keep the fishery open through each subperiod. So just happy to answer questions or think through things, but just wanted to provide that.
Okay, anyone from the council on questions for this proposal or commentary from Comm?
I'm just really confused. We have an original proposal from the division. Then we've got a bunch of proposals that are different proposals from industry. And then we have a second division proposal. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at the first division proposal and voting on that? Yes or no? And then considering the industry proposal? I'm a little confused.
Jeff?
So I can clarify, Dave. So basically the division's proposing this right here. The only change from the pilot is to require a fluke cert greater than 200 or 300 pounds. And then hand in hand with that is our proposal to consider, so to increase the fluke cert to 300 pounds from 200 pounds. They're so intertwined that it's hard not to consider them together. You know, if we're going to require it, we're going to propose requiring it in the program, we should know what the limit is that the holders are allowed to exceed.
So the division proposal, in essence, if I can get this correctly, is both those, the first slide and this one together. Is that correct? Connor?
Correct. If the council were to recommend that the certification is still needed, could now be in the program, then that would be handcuffed with a upping of the cert limit from 200. So, but we did it piecemeal because there was other feedback from industry about whether it's required or not, and that's why it's spread over 3 slides.
Okay. So. Got a work cut out for us tonight. Do we have any other questions or clarifications, or I will entertain a motion on this portion. This motion can also essentially be split up, right, Connor?
I might go. You can go back to the slides, Ms. Paul. So this is the basis of the program from the pilot that we would look to move if there was interest in modifying any of these, you could, and there is recommendations from industry on the next slide as to how one could modify. So, I mean, principally, you know, there's black sea bass is one option posed here of doing a 5 and 7. There's other alternate proposals for food that are a bit more challenging to manage, and the division wouldn't support with given that they would not be required to have a certificate, but those are elements to be discussed amongst the council. And this is, I would also note, like in the black sea bass, there's a distinction between May 1 to August 15th and then August 16th thereafter in terms of the 7 versus 5. Yeah. Something could also be considered similar.
We'll take limited public comment.
Yeah, so the second bullet under CBAS is my proposal. I kind of just want to explain it a little bit. First of all, talking about a weekly aggregate program, when we did the pilot, was to evaluate if we have enough quota to have a weekly aggregate, meaning 7 days in a week. When you recommend a 5 times daily limit for the quota, that's a really big advantage for a part-time fisherman who wants to work 2 or 3 days. A full-time fisherman on the water 5, 6, 7 days a week. In order to access the efficiency that this program gives us, which is still there, I have to give up potential days fishing. So I don't think that's right. I think it should be a little more balanced. And in light of the changes to the daily limits that went through the first council meeting in this cycle, I don't know if it was in this year, whenever the first meeting, the previous council meeting, you lowered the daily limit in the May and July subperiods from 75 to 50 pounds. We persisted at 75 and quickly went to 100 in both of those subperiods last year. So this year we're at 50. So 7 times 50 is 350. We started at 375 last year and went up to 500, 100 times 5. So what I'm proposing is actually still more conservative than last year's weekly limits. And the reason I support 7 times daily limit year round, but again, that first meeting, the daily limit in the fall sub period, so the August 15th on, that got bumped from 50 to 100. So now that's a lot higher. So that's why I kept for this year, the 5X post August 15, just in the sake of being conservative. I'm a fish gear fisherman. I see bass as a big part of that mix nowadays. And as a fish gear fisherman, I don't really have those. Everything is like very sea bass focused from myself or anybody in my position, valley lobster, crab, conch, a little bit of everything. Talking to my fellow fish gear fishermen, we all have the best months of the year in May and June, and it correlates with before Massachusetts opens their pot fishery, which opens like sometime in July. They have like 3 times our quota. Dealers don't even want to buy our fish anymore, because they can go buy 300, 400, 500 from one fisherman in Mass, and have to get 50 pounds a piece from around fishing. So, looking at the proposal at 50 pounds per day, 5 times a week, we're only at 250 pounds a week this May, June, and July, whereas last year we were at 400 or 500. So I kind of made the hybrid proposal of, one more thing. Those fall sub periods with 100 pounds per day are only about 10% of the quota. The 2 spring sub periods that I proposed 7 times the daily limit in have, I think it's like 19.5 and 25% of quota. There was more quota allocated to those sub periods than the fall one. So it's kind of why I kept 7 in the summer and 5. I think moving forward, we should do aggregate program with the daily limit management and try to make it 7 times the daily limit year round with appropriate daily limits. But I thought in light of this year's, that's why I proposed what I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on the money.
That's good.
I don't understand why the summer flounder have to be 7 days a week. Why, you know, we already heard I was already too much already at 2,100 pounds. And now you want to go 7 days, you can't go 5 or a little less, so that there isn't such a large amount. It's going to be flooding the market. That's a lot of fish.
Currently, there's, just to make sure you're aware, there is a division proposal. There's no motion on the floor at this moment. So there's actually no action taken. We're taking minimal public comment because there is no action taken.
And you know, the whole thing is you are going to put the recreational
and the inshore fishermen already because of the way fast. I mean, we're out of business, what I can say, because when they come to the beach, those big boats, we ain't sitting a chance. And, you know, I'll have to go, I'll do other things, I'll go shrimping, I'll let call hot top, where I don't wanna go, but I will go, but I have to go. I don't have to stay outside and work on the food, but unfortunately, this is gonna be a problem inshore within the 3 mile limit. And another advantage is they can go outside, they can go down the sound, they can go around the corner down the shoals and bring in the 2100, that's not far away. And that market's gonna get flooded pretty fast, you know, I mean, if I had a big boat, I'd be going, there's no doubt about it. So, you know, it's something you ought to be looking at, because when it happens, remember what was said at this meeting by me. Because it's going to happen, it's going to destroy the industry as well. Not only the recreational, not only the fisheries, not only the glut, but the inshore fishermen, especially that depend on it.
Thank you. I'll take one final comment in the room, Mr. Booth, and then we'll move to Zoom.
If I could get a clarification, that I didn't see it in the egg, and I don't know. If I have a winter one exemption permit, can I participate in the summer aggregate program?
Yes, yes.
So,
With that said, it's the council could decide, modify, just like Mr. Morris has said, they could offer modified possession limits. Either for the whole fleet or for whether you have a permit or not. Like there are other tools. Whether they participate or not has been discussed. To what degree they can participate is still to be discussed.
excellent. So my ex with all this, and I go back to the process, because the day that 300-pound limit was made, commercial representative wasn't here. Motion being made by a recreational, and second by recreation. There was no discussion about the effect of the 300 pounds by the commercial fishery. This is supposed to be commercial fisheries area. So we go back 12, 14 years, we had a big battle on the sector allocation. There was a move to divide and put poundage into it. This eventually gets us there. This is going to kill the small boat fishery in the state of Rhode Island. Because if you can have a winter one exemption and still fish the summer, especially with that 300-pound a day limit or the 200-pound a day in the aggregate, you're gonna get latent effort off the dock that didn't come out before because it wasn't worth their while, but they're gonna come out now. And all the small boats, whether it's rod and reel, which I am, but all the small draggers, all the potters, they're gonna get decimated. And that hasn't been looked at from an economic standpoint. When we had the sector allocation battle, we had economists come, we had a big discussion on this. This is being dumped in front of you people, and I get sit and ask questions and I don't get answers from it. I would be embarrassed if I didn't have answers to all the questions I'm gonna vote on. And I don't want to, I'm not being nasty or anything else, but that's where we are. I think we are. And if there's no plan to get from one point of the fishery to another, that's a big problem. Because we're making a lot of changes in other areas in our regulations. And if those aren't pieced together, if there's no master plan, nobody has any idea what those effects are going to be. And that discussion hasn't taken place. And I'm a big issue on, we pain the butt on process. And we haven't really followed it.
I only use 2 minutes up on mine. I don't know.
No,
That's fine.
I'm gonna go to Connor. You've already spoken. Go on, Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I just want to iterate. This is a program that's been operating for 4 years, that each year we've done significant projections and analyses presented to the council, through workshop, and the e-packet for hearing, and at a council meetings the last 4 years. So in addition, the semi-structured interview survey was addressing both social and economic considerations for the program. So it is true, we did not have an economist, we don't have an economist on staff to do significant economic analyses on the future fate of the program and under various quotas and prices and such. But I just want to iterate that it's the council, we've provided the council with a plethora of information on both projections, worst case scenarios, as well as actually the fishing community through listserv and the e-packet, detailing various scenarios and how the pilot performed each year, testing each of these things as a fleet, as we move from 3 members per gear type to 6 or 9, as we then move to not requiring gear as a third category, and then last year as we effectively moved towards a open access. which was effectively what the council voted last year. And conversely, we tested conservative measures like the movement of black sea bass from 7 to 5. So it is true that we haven't, it's impossible to test every scenario that we could see. And I would prefer, as Ken mentioned, to discuss all of these at one time in the fall. And that was really it's always been our intent. Assume if the program were to be approved, we would discuss it in 6 months, right, when we discuss annually fluke, scup, black sea bass commercial measures. So I wanted to emphasize that the program itself will be annually discussed moving forward if adopted by the council, and that there has been significant work by the staff to evaluate the efficacy of it for our own. So I just wanted to, and it's in the e-packet, if the council has questions on those technical analyses, the staff and myself are here to answer them.
So I will not take any further public comment because we don't have a motion on the floor. So I'm going to turn back to the council now. Katie?
I just have a question for Connor.
Sure.
Would you have any of the winter one aggregate participants in the summer and fall pilot program?
Yes, this body voted last time this year to allow them to come in.
How many do you think you have?
I think that was the number that John mentioned earlier.
That were, you mentioned who
How
were.
many went on boats?
One, I believe we had somewhere around 43.
I think, you know, I think James asked.
In the participating in the pilot,
How many winter one boats? Yeah.
so they did both, which is what they keep bringing up.
I would say. I'm gonna say, yeah, around 10 of them.
10 of them?
Yeah. This last year when we let more boats in, we certainly saw a few more of the winter one boats. Some of them were in it prior to that, but we really saw an increase this last year.
And were there any mesh restrictions?
So there are already mesh rules in place. There was a concern by industry members that maybe some of the participants weren't switching on their fluke net, and that's where you get those two proposals, I think.
Okay, the council, any other, I will not be taking any other. To the council, for a motion, no motion. I need some form of action.
I'd like to make a motion to increase the possession limit for black sea bass to 7 times a week limit during the first 2 sub periods.
Summer subdivision.
Okay, I can.
Summary.
Sorry.
Good, if I can pull it down the bottom.
Yes, that.
So your motion, just to clarify, is
Just that.
just that portion. Okay. So do we have a second on just that, Jason? Okay, so the motion before us is to recommend to the director to increase the possession limit for black sea bass only to 7 times for the summer sub period. Is that right, Nicole?
That was Katie and who's the second?
Jason. This, so just to clarify, this motion does not address any of the other parts. Okay. All right. Is there any commentary from the council?
Just want to make sure that the council knows that we took a reduction from the Atlantic Marine Fisheries Council of about maybe 23%. So this is definitely going to hinder the 7 days. We're going to have shutdowns. We will have shutdowns.
Any way in?
Yeah, that was at the workshop. That was also part of the basis for the 5-day, for both the 5-day, I suppose 7-day allotment. Yeah, I think by numbers, it basically puts us back at where we were 2 years ago for black sea bass Florida.
Okay, are we ready for the question? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to the director adopting just the 7 times daily limit for black sea bass for the summer fall program?
Motion's not right.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, it was 5 times in the summer, sorry, 7 times in the summer and 5 times in the fall, if I understood Katie's motion, correct?
Yes, trainers, so,
Yes, it was 5 in the summer through May 1 through August 15, and then 5 thereafter. That-
This is the proposal.
I think
Okay, before I ask the question,
They're backwards.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, Katie, can you please restate your motion?
Can you go back to the slide, the previous slide?
the bottom is what you're suggesting.
The bottom line. Increase possession limit to 7 times for summer sub periods only, May 1 to August 15th.
and just to clarify, there is no motion regarding summer flounder, so there would be no action on this, is that correct? Okay, all right, just want to make sure that that was. That's good for it, yep, no, that's fine. Okay. All those, let's make sure you're good, right? Is that correct, Katie? Yes, okay. So all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of a 7 times daily limit for black sea bass with summer sub periods only, May 1 through August 15th. Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. It is not unanimous. The motion fails. We need a new motion.
My motion's not gonna have anything to do with sea bass, and it will make everybody come on it.
Give it a go.
Yeah, I want to, it's almost like going back to the drawing board, but I think we need to separate this and have only a black sea bass aggregate program. And eliminate the summer flounder program. Amen. I would be there. Amen. Summer flounder aggregate program. And I want to give my reasoning behind it. When this first started out, it was fairly simple. It was pretty simple when it first started out. And if I've been looking at this stuff for the past 7 months, and I can't wrap my head around it, I can't imagine what half the people in this room are trying to do this. So, and I hate to say it because I've been a big proponent of this sport for a long time. But that's my motion, to eliminate the aggregate, summer aggregate program for summer flounder.
And you had a second part of that, so just to make sure so the poll can get.
Okay, well, I was just explaining why.
Yeah, no, we just need to know exactly what the motion is.
Okay, the motion is to postpone, I guess, or delay implementation of the summer flounder aggregate program for the summer period.
Is there a second?
Second.
Serious? Okay, so I'm gonna go to Connor first.
okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Jason. So you're effectively saying that I'm thinking of these 2 things going on for both species and they're both possession limits, so you're suggesting that,
Oh, I'm sorry, separate sea bass aggregate stays, summer flounder aggregate postpone.
so maybe in other words, maybe mathy, I guess. Black sea bass is 7, 5, 6, whatever, that's something, and then fluke is 0 times.
Correct.
Effectively.
Daily limit.
Okay. Any commentary from the council? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna ask the question. All those in favor of recommending to the director to postpone or delay the summer fall program for summer flounder. Raise your hand. Yeah, I'll try it again here. All those in favor of recommending to the director to postpone, delay the summer fall program for summer flounder, please raise your hand. 1, 2.
Don't forget to put aggregate.
So we are voting in the middle of this and you want to amend it.
No, I'm just saying, she forgot to put aggregate.
Oh, okay, just want to make sure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the motion is tied. Or the vote is tied.
No, it's
4-3.
4-3.
Sorry, it's getting late. You guys better go on, please, go down. All right. So motion passes 4-3. Okay. Connor, does this address all elements of this portion right now?
Yes, I guess I'd still like to hear on black sea bass. So my
Okay.
hope is that the council will. And we'll talk about it at the end, but moving forward,
So
basically
we,
0 times fluke
yeah,
and then something for sea bass.
so we need a motion to discuss the possession limits for black sea bass. No. Any takers?
Sure, why not?
Okay, thank
I'd like to
you.
make a motion to discuss the sea bass aggregate program possession for the summer aggregate program. You don't mind, like I said, my voice is shot. What's that?
No, thank you. So you're. No,
I'm ready to have it once. I gotta go back to smoking cigarettes or something. So, yeah, how to word it, let me see. So I guess we, I don't know if we should just open a discussion about it before you're making a motion.
Well, yeah, because the previous motion on black sea bass, I basically took with being
Yes.
silent on fluke, was that would essentially eliminate the aggregate program for fluke. I mean, it was basically silent on it.
Yes.
And then basically it would have the 7 times provision for the sea bass. Okay, so that was kind of the idea on the original motion. So essentially what we did now was vote to not authorize the fluke aggregates, and now we're kind of like hanging on the sea bass. So I would basically sort of make another motion is basically put in a motion for the aggregate program during the time periods of 5 times. If the 7 times didn't pass last time, 5 times through the entire period. So that would be my motion.
Seconded by Mr. Roderick. Okay. Okay, great, thank you, Nicole. Is there any comments? All right, all those in favor, if there's no comment, all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of a 5 times daily limit for black sea bass for the summer fall aggregate program, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 5. 5, 0. 5, 2. I'm sorry, guys. Thank you.
Getting late.
It's getting late. All right. The 2 is Ms. Egan and Mr. D'Angelo.
Charles.
No, Jared, thank you. Okay. So now we are on to the final motion as a whole. All right, so this reflects all the motions that have been put in for the aggregate program. Okay, so if Nicole, could you do us a favor and just quickly run through what has been voted on? And this is what would reflect the program that we have based on what we voted, okay? So maybe I'll help Nicole go along here. So the first motion was for general eligibility. So the question was whether to pass this. What the general eligibility requirements would be, and the motion was to adopt the division proposal. If both were to continue. Now go to the next one. The next element was to adopt the general permit conditions as recommended by the division. And that one passed. Okay. And then the next one is,
That one was amended.
this one is amended to trigger the 80% for the summer fall program for summer flounder and black sea bass. Hang in there with me. So then for the winter one program, the recommendation was to adopt as the division proposed it. And then for summer fall eligibility and season, the recommendation was to adopt it as proposed. And finally, the permit, or no, not finally, the permit conditions, there was a motion to adopt it as noticed from the division. And then finally, the motions that we have on the table are to recommend to the director to postpone the summer fall aggregate program for summer flounder, which eliminates any of the program elements that pertain to summer flounder that was previously voted on. Okay, so that one passed. So now we're not looking at anything relating to summer flounder in those previous motions. You're just considering what you voted on for black sea bass. And then the final element of possession limits for black sea bass was to limit it to 5 times the daily limit. So is there a motion to adopt the program on a whole for black sea bass based on what you've already done? Is there a motion to adopt the program? Yeah,
Just clarification, so the summer flounder is still included for winter one. It would be just black sea bass for the summer.
for the summer, okay. So that's the clarification, and then you were gonna adopt this, what we would need is a motion for the program as a whole with these kind of elements. Connor, before you go.
I was just gonna quickly bring up for the council, just to make sure. There was a discussion when we went out to notice, we weren't sure if group would be adopted or not, so we did go out to notice with the cert limit change, so my assumption is by excluding fluke, we're also not touching the limit on the exemption cert. No, as part of that discussion.
There was no action on that, is what.
Right, so we're looking for status quo on 200.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the entire.
You want to write that one down, Nicole? Second. Okay. So what I'm going to take a whack at here is just one more time for the cheap seats in the back, is recommend to all those in favor of recommending to the director the adoption of the aggregate program for summer flounder and black sea bass as modified today. So just, I'm gonna enumerate it, so it's just in all on our minds, so we're not missing anything, there's nothing going on, so. Maybe you might help me out. So black sea bass with all the modifications per the motions, that's in this motion. For flounder, the motion includes the summer, right? The winter one, okay,
But excluded.
but excludes the summer, and then status quo for the exemption. Is that correct? Okay, so
As discussed and voted on.
as discussed and voted on, so all those in favor of approving what I just said, and like,
We have a second for that motion.
do we have a second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Passes unanimously. Okay. Pete,
What?
We have to go on to the addition or revision of the last general provisions here.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is our part one. We are just doing some minor changes to it. It's in your e-packet there. We are adding and amending some terms for consistency with statute, just so they say exactly the same thing. We are removing some terms that we do not use in our regulations in the definitions. We are proposing to add species that are not in there, that we just set regulations for. Cobia, sandlance, and Spanish mackerel most recently, and some other minor changes as well that are in your e-packet. So this is for part one, definitions and general provisions.
Okay,
Adoption.
hold on. Pete,
Next slide.
there's additional information.
As they noticed, we're just looking the same rule term definition with the statute. So there's, which applies to this, but we had a comment that basically objected to this, with the medical doctor diagnosis and the fact that it didn't include the mental illness. So that's why the comment was referring to medical hardship. But medical incapacity also addresses those same items, so we thought we'd throw that up there as well. We got a comment from ACLU, objection to that, but so, like we said, this is syncing up exactly with statute. We changed the statute last year to sync up with the rule, and our goal was to then just again modify the rule to get rid of some redundant language, of which we're now including the term. Some of this stuff fits better as a term than it does in the rule. So I guess I would say, whether or not this happens or not, it is what the statute terms say. Regardless if these terms are changed or not, the rule is still very clear on the applicability of how these two work. So I don't know, you can decide what you want. I don't know that whether you adopt it or not has any effect. I'm going to suggest has no effect on how we operate. There's only a couple, and just in regards to that comment, we only issue a couple of operator permits a year. And I don't know that Margaret's here. I don't think we scrutinize at all. If you can't fish and you want someone else to use your license to keep your activity going, they get granted. But I think the comment is duly noted that it excludes mental illness. And we're not interested, I don't think you're getting looking at that diagnosis either, but that is exactly what the rule says. So that's how we sync it up. But again, whether or not it happens, it doesn't change anything how we operate. So I probably support changing them. We could work on a statutory term change later on. Because if you don't do it, then they're out of sync, and you know, we hate that kind of stuff.
Okay. So that's also included as what John proposed as well. Comments?
Right, thanks, Madam Chair. So effectively, the council could look to move all of these provisions, or they could look to, you may want to consider all of them, but for this, for us to address later. If we noted, the reality is it's in statute, so it's already in existence, but we did get it. As we're trying to take things up, we got a comment in opposition. So if you want them to remain inconsistent, they can, but statute's overriding anything. So we thought.
I make a motion to adopt the definitions and this new language on hardship to keep it in sync with the statute. If the General Assembly sees fit to change the statute, they can do so.
Seconded?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Oh, go ahead. All right. All those in favor for recommending to the director the adoption of the amendment to terms of BC notice? 1, 2, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. There we go. I have 3 more items and they're a little lighter. So, we're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is our legislative update on House Bill H563 that pertains to the governing provisions of the Marine Fisheries Council. As you remember, you discussed this last year with Bob and voted on it. It was heard in the House Committee for Environment. There is no Senate update at this time. We don't have a hearing date for the Senate. So it is just still pending in the legislature. And that's all I have on that. I'm actually going to turn our item 8 for member terms and renewals and vacancies. This is important, so perk up. I'm going to turn it over to Connor actually.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, as many of you saw on the list, there's probably 2 seats which are on the council. We're seeking applications for now, closing on Friday. One is to replace Chris Ryan's old seat on the council in that management, science, conservation capacity, and one is to fill Dave Monte's seat, who is on his last term and is set to expire, I think, this month. So, assuming we have candidates for the recreational seat, I also wanted to just personally thank Dave for his time on the council. He's served well for many years with great insight and participation, not just at the council, but following along at the commission and mid-Atlantic levels. So that's been really thoughtful.
I personally think it's rude that he's leaving me, but it's fine. Nothing personal. Okay, are there any other matters?
2 really quick ones. I wanted to get your feedback on something to include in future e-packets for you or not. There are fisheries violations that then become public. There are certain outlets that people use, like Rhode with the magazine, showing violations that to keep people up to date on what are the challenges with managing marine fisheries, what are the types of rules that seem to be not adhered to most frequently. And there was a request from the public about whether in the future the council would like to see a summary of those before a meeting or part of the feedback. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time in the meeting on them, but if people were just interested in the type of violations that were occurring either on the record or commercial, we can do that. We produce, DLE produces similar reports for us and for Rhode in their magazines or other outlets. So speaking with their leadership, we could do a similar thing for the council if they found it of interest and just update every time. Yeah, we based on the previous quarter period, here's what's going on in the world of fisheries violations. We do some posting online, but they're not all posted on Facebook and whatnot. So if that was of interest to folks to see, the councils do this pretty regularly too. So it's not like specific to Rhode Island. New England Council does a similar practice of reporting out all or substantive violations as it relates to New England Council managed species. So maybe even a slight nod, if that being a decent idea would be helpful. All right, perfect. And the last thing I wanted to bring up to you all related to Menhaden, we've had an individual ask to try and think about the Menhaden management area and it's in its current structure, whether it's meeting the needs across the board, equitably, commercial, recreational, ecological significance. That's a really big undertaking. It was, as Rich mentioned earlier, it was substantive when we went through it. It required unstaffed time, regional support, academic support, your time, harvester's time. So I just want you, I don't need a response right now. I would just want you to think about whether that's something that this body would want, like it could be as substantive as what we just went through with the pilot ag, a multi-year process, a lot of meetings, discussions, modeling, data collection, etc. So I'm not comfortable moving forward with some type of significant abolishment of the area without a substantive scientific basis as well as engagement with everybody. So I just want you to think about that and whether that's something you're interested in, would recommend the division or to our director pursuing. So last 2 things for me, if you don't mind. As you remember last year, we had the Rhode Island Council bill. As part of that, we're now retooling our annual report for you all. That's showing landings by species, licensing, recreational statistics. So while we're nearing the completion of that for summarizing past year, we will send that to you all to get your feedback, what you like, what you don't like, things like that. And then we will look to make any changes and then post live. So stay tuned for that. And the previous year council summary of that we typically do of agreement between the council and the director decisions and summary, as well as the rec report will come at our next council meeting. So stay tuned for that.
Okay,
That's it for me. Sorry.
any others? All right, hearing no objection to adjourning. The meeting is adjourned by